Any apologies, please? Apologies, please.
Mr. Mayor, I've got Councillor Berry and Councillor Leeming.
Animal? Any declarations of interest, please? Okay. Declarations of interest?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I declare an interest personal and prejudicial in item 9, 27.10. A member of my close family has applied for a job at the City Council.
Any more? To approve the minutes of the annual meeting of the Council held on 26th May 2010. Are the minutes moved? Seconded? Okay. Okay to sign? Okay. Item 4, to receive any announcement from the Mayor. The weather forecast seems to be going to be a muggy evening, so if members would like to take their jackets off, they're welcome to do that. I've got some announcements. In accordance with Rule CP 39R, I propose to add the following urgent items to the agenda. First is item 9, additional minutes of the Council Cabinet relating to accommodation strategy, and item 2 is revenue budget establishment and vacancy control. These reports have been circulated to all members with the Cabinet papers. The reason for the urgency is that these matters require Council's approval, but were only considered by the Cabinet last night. And then the next announcement is, I just want to place congratulations to Councillor Hickson on being appointed the chair of the Derbyshire Police Authority. Yeah. And from that follows this item 9A would be, which is appointment of cabinet member for adult social care and health. The reason for the urgency is that Councillor Hickson has recently been appointed chair of Derbyshire Police Authority and has decided to relinquish his cabinet post. The appointment of a replacement cannot wait until the next council meeting. A revised agenda including these items has been tabled. I think it's been circulated. Members have got it. Also, with the council's agreement, I propose to take item 13 after item 14.1a, as it will be superseded if the motion at item 14.1 is passed. Is everyone happy with that? Yeah? Thank you very much. To receive any statements from members of the Council, we got 3 statements, and the first one is from Councillor Holmes, Deputy Leader of the Council and Council Cabinet Member for Planning and Environment. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Council is aware, the Government has announced the end of regional housing targets and its intention to transfer responsibility on future housing requirements to a local level. Therefore, Derby City Council will not be taking forward the development plan document Core Strategy Options paper produced for consultation in January 2010. A line has been drawn under that process, and we now need to move forward to take a fresh look at Derby's housing needs and capacity for development and produce a new forward plan based on the Government's localisation agenda. To give confidence that we can review and move forward based on new priorities, the Communities Secretary, Ed Pickles, has made it clear that the councils do not have to wait for new legalisation to adopt the Government's intent to scrap housing targets. That removes the threat that many residents in Mickletover, Littleover, Alice Stream, Ackworth Sinfin and Chellaston were very concerned with, namely a majority of the proposals for housing options bordering the west and south of the city in the context of the recent Core Strategy Options paper. There is almost certainly going to be a continuing need for new housing in Derby, but the process we now need to undertake as a council is to review what those needs will be in the future in a sustainable way with the support and involvement of local people. The government has also recently announced that private residential gardens are now excluded from the definition of previously developed land, brownfield. This will make garden grabbing less of an issue in the future. The national indicative minimum density of 30 dwellings per hectare is also removed. This will further reduce pressure on planners to look to build high-density developments. These changes are welcomed by the current administration and by many residents across the city who have lobbied and campaigned alongside members of this chamber since the Labour government reclassified back gardens as brownfield in 2001. As Cabinet Member for Planning and Environment, I've made it clear that this administration wants to protect our green spaces and will look to build on brownfield sites and regenerate areas of the city. A realistic and sustainable housing strategy needs to be put into place based on new guidelines and decision-making at a local level where we are able to properly consult and put local people first. Together, these changes emphasise that it is for local authorities and communities to take the decisions that are best for them and to decide for themselves the best locations and types of development in their areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Scrapping regional targets and the strategy of the previous government will not remove the need for housing, and housing which is much needed in and around the city of Derby. Whilst some of these preemptive strikes in terms of moving away from the strategy of consultation through the core strategy and the development group is going to be scrapped, there are many things that were positive about that. Local consultation and feedback was one of those. So in many ways it seems a retrograde step to sort of stop that process, because that particular core strategy is much wider than what Councillor Holmes has identified as the areas where developments were identified. However, consultation was still a priority for those. The core strategy and the consultation development plan is much wider and much more comprehensive than that. So I would urge the controlling group to reconsider scrapping the whole process, because many hours, many intense work with members, with scrutiny commissions, and with officers has already been undertaken, and a lot of positive good work has been done. And it would be a shame to actually remove and put that to one side and start afresh. If starting afresh actually means starting further back in the process. And that is very much sort of not to be welcomed if that's the approach that's going to be taken. The issue of brownfield sites being prioritised is not new. The previous plan and the government prioritise brownfield sites as the target for new developments first and foremost. So that is not a new plan. That is actually maintaining and continuing what the previous government and certainly what we've been doing in Derby City has been undertaken. I do have to say that whilst I was chair of the Planning and Transportation Committee, we undertook an extensive investigation of garden grabbing and gardens being used at brownfield sites. Many of the residents consulted, in particular Alistree, Mackworth, Sinfin and the other areas that have been identified here, weren't in themselves opposed to garden sites being used as further development. What they were opposed to was how it had an impact, a negative impact on the environment and character of the area. And that is something that still is an important issue. However, if we say that those gardens cannot be considered in the right environment and criteria, we are saying to certain parts of the city, like Normanton, where the density is much greater and the 30 hectares of dwelling maybe is not being maintained, we are putting pressure on, and we have to avoid, any new strategy should avoid, actually intensifying the developments in those sort of areas, enabling less open space to be created in those areas, if these two recently announced initiatives are taken on face value without consideration of saying, if we need to develop, housing is needed for the City of Derby. How we plan that is very critical, and we should not just focus to protect the green, leafy areas of the Derby City and actually continue to abuse and actually ignore the needs of people living in places like Normanton, which is the ward that I represent, because they need as much green area, as much good quality air as anybody else in the City of Derby. So I note Councillor Holmes' keenness to scrap what's already been done and to push ahead with some of the many new initiatives coming from the new Condem government. But it's very, very important that we do not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that some of the very positive work that's been done is not ignored, and that the strategy and the hard work I know officers in this council have already undertaken in terms of consultation, in terms of identifying where housing needs are required and where potential developments can be created, are ignored if the previous core strategy option paper and its work is going to be ignored. So all that, I think, needs to be taken into consideration, and I would urge caution to the Council and the Cabinet that new initiatives are not followed in haste at the expense of all the good work that's happened in the past.
Councillor Allen Wood, anybody? Okay, Councillor Troop.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We on this side have opposed the imposition of house building targets and welcome this announcement. The change of the designation of gardens is also something that we would support. The planned changes made to shape the future of our city should not be dictated to by remote and unaccountable outside bodies, no matter how well-meaning they are. Most local people were completely unaware of the process that led to these targets until consultation on the core strategy started to spread the background information to the public. Councillors in the wards affected in the south and west of the city will be well aware of the public opposition to the future developments that would be needed to meet these housing targets. And Councillor Combs could add Blakery's ward to his list of wards affected. However, we should not lose sight of the fact that we face an ever-increasing housing crisis, particularly in the supply of social housing. Social housing generally requires a public subsidy to be available, but the public finances are in such a state that such funds are not going to be available or very hard to come across for some years ahead. We're now experiencing the true cost of new labour. Many of us who lived through the Thatcher years will know that the Conservatives traditionally look after their own, but we are led to believe that under David Cameron the Tories now have a caring side. In planning the future of housing developments in Derby, the Conservatives have an opportunity to demonstrate how they can both meet market needs and at the same time provide the additional social housing we desperately need. And a big threat to getting rid of these targets is what happens with neighbouring authorities. There's a fear that the neighbouring authorities could pursue developments around the city boundary which are not in our best interests, and I would hope that the Council could move forwards on this in consensus across the housing market area and work with our local authorities to best meet the housing needs of the area. Thank you.
Next statement is from Councillor Grimmadale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am delighted to announce to Council that a decision to finally build Cheddiston's new library has been made by the Conservative administration following last night's Cabinet meeting. The £1.2 million library will be sited in Cheddiston Park, approximately 50 metres south-east of the current building. This location will enable us to construct a larger building without the possibility of the foundations damaging the root systems of several mature trees, and by not being surrounded by trees will be more visible and therefore less likely to suffer from antisocial behaviour. A library in this location also offers a perfect base from which to study and appreciate Cheddiston Park's natural heritage, and will enable us to continue to provide a library service from the current library while construction of the new one is underway. The library will be an exemplar of low-carbon construction and technology, including within it a range of features that reflect the Council's commitment to protecting the environment. We believe that this will be the first eco-library in the country and demonstrates that Derby City Council has the ambition, vision and drive to lead the way forward in tackling climate change. It will also provide exhibitions, displays and learning facilities within the library that support the study and appreciation of Chaddesden Park's natural heritage. The new library project has been plagued by years of waiting, delays, bureaucracy and dithering. That is why the new Conservative administration were determined, as promised, to deliver a new library for the residents of Chaddesden as quickly as possible. The 1.2 million funding has been ring-fenced for the project, with completion expected around the end of 2012. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was given to understand that statements read at Council are for issues that haven't previously been in the press. Well, this issue clearly has already been in the press because it was in the Telegraph on Thursday, June the 24th. So it isn't really news because this article did appear. And following this article, I have had numerous complaints from constituents because the picture of the chap, he's actually holding up an old library ticket. He never goes in the library, and the staff are complaining that this gentleman, who I understand also delivers leaflets for the Tory party, has been used to propose this project. He has never been in the library, and the staff and some of the users have written to me to say that, and they are most upset by this article appearing. However, as members will know, and the residents of Chaddesden Ward will know, I have worked for over 9 years, and this is just one of the files with all the correspondence and the related emails that I've been working on for the past 9 years. The government... Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am concerned that there has been no in detail costings on this issue, because I spoke to our architect on Friday and he knows nothing about this application. There's been no plans drawn up, it hasn't been costed, and he's very worried that actually in the statement, in the article, it does say that the library will be there within a year and a half. He doesn't think that's deliverable. So these promises and these false promises that have been made in the Telegraph and in the Cabinet report last night and now in the statement by Councillor Grimmadell is quite clearly, I think, fictional. All Councillor Grimmadell is doing is laying the path for his election next year, because I don't think he'll be a councillor for much longer.
Councillor Naita.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say that I think out of those years, Labour Group was in control for 7 of those, so I think they actually didn't contribute much towards the library anyway. I just wanted to say that I'm also delighted that the decision's been taken to get the new library in Chaddesden. And I did discuss this with Councillor Grimmadell at our handover, and as you'll recall, that we said that we would give it 6 months and the decision would be taken after that 6 months, and the 6 months would have ended in June. So, Councillor Grimmadell, thanks for taking that decision. However, I still know people are divided. They are divided about where the library is to be sited, but it clearly stated that what we found out was that nobody was going to be happy of where it was going to go. Even the survey that we did, the independent survey that we conducted, also turned around and said that people were split in what they wanted to do. And then we're going back to the negative, comments made by Councillor Bolton there about, what will be and what won't be, instead of just saying, that we are going ahead with it. And that's positive. The timescales, we will have to work to them. The programmes will have to be drawn up, and that's fine. So, realistically, it was the Liberal Democrats wanted a balanced view of what, the constituents in Chaddesden wanted, and we did all the work. And from my point of view, 6 months down the line, we have, not made the decision, but we contributed towards it. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Next statement is from Councillor Poulter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This week's seen the start of a major refurbishment of the Morlidge area of the city between the bus station and the Corporation Street. The area has suffered in recent years from the need to utilise the street as a temporary bus station. Contractors have now begun the long-awaited and much-needed alterations to the footways and highway, designed to make massive improvement to the street scene and to make the area significantly more user-friendly for pedestrians and local businesses alike. Improvements would include street lighting being replaced and improved, footways will be relayed and significantly widened, extra provision will be made for blue badge holder parking, and loading and unloading provision will be made for local businesses. Work will be completed in 3 phases over the next 6 months, and every effort will be made to achieve the improvements with the minimum possible disruption. For some time now, both in my previous role as Chair of the Planning and Transport Scrutiny Commission and now as Chair of, as Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods, I've been made aware of concerns around access at the bus station for people with disabilities. I'm now able to inform the Council that, along with many other improvements in this regard, I have ensured that in due course, in the course of this refurbishment, a taxi rank will be provided immediately outside the front doors of the bus station. The Morlidge forms a vital link between the river lights and important areas of the city, such as the Market Hall, the Cathedral Quarter, and I look forward to the completion of this project to the benefit of Derby. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Any response from either of the groups? I understand. Oh, okay. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this. Sorry, is that not gone on? Oh, it was malfunctioning, Mr. Mayor. This is really a continuation of the work we put in place, and we welcome this. It's a very welcome improvement. The street has been quite a mess for a long time. The only caution I would add is I'm not convinced that right outside the doors of the bus station is the right place for the taxi rank. And could I ask you just to reconsider, Councillor Poulter, to move it to outside the front of the law courts, because the pavement is at its narrowest at that point, and having people getting out of taxis there, I think, will turn out to be a problem.
From the Council Cabinet members. Next item is to receive any questions from the public to members of the Council Cabinet and answers to those questions. The first one is from Simon Bacon to Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. 2010 is the International Year of Biodiversity, which should be of great importance to Derby City Council. The discovery of common lizards, Zootarca vivipara, on the proposed waste incineration plant site in Sinfin Lane, Sinfin, Derby, is seen by many as an important example of local biodiversity in the city. Taking into consideration the importance of biodiversity, can you please advise when the City Council last carried out a full biodiversity review of the old tannery site on Sinfin Lane, which it owns and proposes to allow resource recovery solutions to destroy, and provide me with a copy of the report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. The City Council certainly recognises the importance at all times of protecting and enhancing our natural environmental heritage, including biodiversity. For instance, last Sunday, the 4th of July, we were very pleased to launch Mickleover Meadows as the city's 10th local nature reserve. We also recognise our particular legal duties to protect from adverse effects of development certain specific species, such as the common lizard. Government advice, however, reminds us that in delivering our wider duties to protect our natural environment, we must do this in ways which provide for the development needs of all of the community. While the planning application from RRS to develop the former Sinfin tannery site was refused, not though on potential effects on the biodiversity, steps were taken by officers of the City Council working with the applicants to ensure this particular species would have been protected from adverse effects from the proposed development. The last time the ecology of the site was surveyed was as part of the preparation of the environmental statement, which had to accompany the planning application as required by the EIA regulations. The results of this ecological survey were reviewed for us by Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, WDT, under the contract we have with them to give us expert advice in relation to wildlife and planning matters. It was a result of advice from DWT that specific additional survey work was undertaken by the applicants in relation to reptiles. As a result of this, common lizards were found on the site and suitable measures to protect them in accordance with our legal duties were put in place. The surveys and the extensive documents from which form the environmental statement are available to everyone to view on the Council website, at the Planning Department's offices on Frygate and in Sinfin Library. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just a supplementary question. So basically you're clarifying that Derby City Council haven't done their own biodiversity survey of the site. You're just going on what United Utilities are saying, which is corporate sponsor of Derbyshire Wildlife Trust.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. We carried out what we were required to do as a council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the first question has already been answered, i.e. we already have a public day and an evening during the inquiry, the incinerator appeal inquiry, which will be held between 7th September and 7th October, the drop-in sessions for the public being on the 15th September and the 16th September, 15th during the day here, 16th at St. Stephen's. Shall I go straight on to the second question?
Yes, please.
The second question. The lawyer chosen by the Council to defend the refusal decision for the Derby incinerator works for the same chambers as the incinerator developer's lawyer, and the incinerator developer's lawyer is a Queen's Counsel, whilst the City Council's lawyer is a junior barrister. Yet the City Council is paying for both. Can the Council explain why the public should not believe that this may lead to a poor showing by the Council in order to further progress the contract with the incinerator developer, which they are in the process of signing?
Good evening, Dorothy. The barrister appointed by the Planning Authority is Hugh Richards from number 5 Chambers. Mr. Richards is a highly experienced planning barrister and advocate. He has a wealth of experience and extensive knowledge of the town and country planning matters, consistently appearing in the annual planning magazine list of, quotes, highest rated planning barristers. He is probably the council that has most knowledge of Derby in terms of planning and its local plan policies, having regularly represented the council at planning inquiries over a number of years, and in particular having represented the council in terms of the inquiry into the adoption of the City of Derby local plan review. No conflict of interest is created simply because barristers from the same chambers act for opposing parties. Barrister chambers are not synonymous with a law firm. Barristers in the same chambers are not partners and do not share profits. Barristers operate as sole practitioners, the purpose of chambers being simply to bring to share clerks and operating expenses.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. As the incinerator, the prototype, has breached dioxin limits in the Isle of Wight and is currently shut down, deaths will be brought forward, and that was related yesterday in the Telegraph as well. People are saying, Councillor, that the Council is more interested in redecorating.
Can I please ask you this supplementary? Yeah, please, supplementary question.
We just don't believe that the Council is interested in putting forward a good enough legal case. We don't believe that that can happen because of the fact of the Council paying for both the legal advocates.
Supplementary, please.
So the question is, still, How can the showing, because Councillor Wood did not answer, how the council could show that the public will trust such a thing because of the council paying for both the representatives. And of course, RRS having the more expensive Queen's Council.
Councillor Wood, please.
I think I did answer that point, Mr. Mayor, but having said that, I think that the independence of the Planning Committee was demonstrated in its decision, and the Planning Inspectorate did not interfere with our deliberations. I do not intend to interfere with the deliberations of the Independent Planning Inspector.
Thanks, Councillor.
Evening, Mr. Mayor. Why did I presume question one was question one to had? Yeah. So it's with them being altered. Why do DCC contractors have to trash the visual environment when installing new street signage or marking roads or pavements for repair? For example, by using yellow spray paint, which will be visible for months, long after completion.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Underhill. Thank you for the question. And at the outset, thank you for the question, which is a very valid point in actual fact. Clearly, there is no deliberate intention to trash the visual environment when carrying out roadworks or marking out future repairs, but this is certainly an aspect which requires improvement. To this end, last Friday, a workshop was arranged to discuss routine highway maintenance specifically and ways of improving practice. This was attended by operational staff, supervisory staff from Carillion and Derby City Council, and I can confirm that the question was asked at this workshop. And as a result, measures agreed include more careful and more discreet marking out initially, and the complete removal of markings on completion on repair. So thank you very much for the question.
Well, just really a comment that I've actually witnessed that in the past week. Yep. That was it. Number 2. Bye-bye, Mr. Hickson. Could the Council please advise us why Wilmot Street had the established 25-year-old trees removed in April, leaving the street not only severed by Lara Croft Way, but also totally barren except for a few newly planted shrubs or bushes?
Thank you again, Mr. Underhill. Unfortunately, these trees had to be taken down to allow for the construction of the car park, the reconstruction of the car park and the footway in connection with Connecting Derby. These proposals were reported and agreed at the Arboretum Neighbourhood Board on the 10th of March. We will be installing returning new trees which will be planted to replace those removed on completion of the work, and it is proposed that we will use lime trees and plane trees or similar depending on the available stock. The trees were in fact taken down prior to the bird nesting season so that there would not be any unnecessary delay in the works taking place.
Supplementary. Yep. Is there a reason why the trees were removed, please?
Just to confirm, Mr. Hunter, it was purely to enable the reconstruction of the car park and the footway. I did actually see these trees prior to this. It was a lot to do with the roots and the damage that was, and their expansion along the car park into the roadway and along the footpath. But they had to be done for Connecting Derby purposes, Mr. Underhill.
Could I Item 8, to receive any written questions from non-council cabinet members to members of the council cabinet and the answers to those questions. The first question we have from Councillor Whitby to Councillor Poulter. Councillor Whitby, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the cabinet member tell me and the people of Mackworth when we can expect the refurbishment of the Prince Charles Avenue District Centre to take place? This was budgeted for in 2008, but due to the change of administration was never started. Around £20,000, I believe, has already been spent on plans and consultation. Can we not let this money go to waste by finishing the job, please? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Whitby. Local transport plan funding has previously been set aside to undertake initial feasibility work on improvements to the Mackworth District Centre. It's estimated, however, that the cost to fully refurbish the centre are in excess of £1 million, and at present no funding has been identified to complete the works. There remains significant financial pressure upon the local transport plan and other capital funding schemes. For the most part, improvements to district centres have relatively minor transport benefits compared with other mainstream transport schemes, although the wider regeneration and community benefits are well recognised. For the last few years, funding has not been available from the local transport plan for wholesale district centre improvements, although other funding sources have been secured. For example, Growth Point at Alveston District Centre. Going forward, it is unlikely that the local transport plan would be able to fully support costly improvements at Mackworth, although it may be possible to use external funding from other nearby developments. As part of the 2010-2011 Highways and Transport Programme, Cabinet have agreed to fund further design work on the transport elements within the District Centre Master Plan. It isn't possible to say when the works could be implemented, as it will very much depend on future funding allocations and other commitments, which are unsure at this time.
Yeah, does the cabinet member agree that this refurb is urgently needed, as much as anything, to reorganise the very chaotic parking, which is a very real safety risk? We don't want a fatality before any action is taken.
Thank you, Councillor Whitby. I acknowledge the condition there, but there are similar district centres around the city that require similar works, and maybe that your local neighbourhood board could look at a plan to address the parking issues there.
Next question is from Councillor Winter to Councillor Poulter.
Thank you. Would the Cabinet member give the residents of Alveston an update on the progress of the motion passed unanimously by this council on the 20th of January regarding the provision of a ring road bus route to the Royal Hospital? What date will the service commence, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Whitby. Winter, sorry. Okay, apologies. The potential for a ring road bus service linking the southern suburbs of the city directly to the Derby Hospital has been examined informally at this stage by the NHS Trust, bus operators and council officers. In discussions with the local bus operators, it is estimated that such a route would have an end-to-end journey time of approximately 45 minutes, and in order to be effective in reducing journey times compared with current services travelling through the city centre, the new service would need to run on at least a half-hourly basis between 7 a.m. and 7:30 p.m, Monday to Friday. This level of service would require 3 buses to operate. Neither of the main bus companies in the city feel that such a service would be commercially viable without significant ongoing financial support. It's estimated the service would cost approximately £370,000 a year to run, although obviously actual costs would be lower after taking account of revenue from the fares. No budget currently exists to meet these costs, and the level of benefit provided by the bus service to the residents of Derby is not clear at this point. I have, however, asked for further consideration to be given to this matter and for officers to provide me with a detailed report. I have asked that the report consider whether innovative funding solutions exist and that it's also set out in detail the potential journey time savings which such a service might bring.
Supplementary, Councillor Winter.
Yes, I do, thank you. When did the rules change regarding passing of motions within this chamber? That motion was passed.
Councillor Poulter.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite with you on that. Could you explain that for me, please?
If the motion was passed and was agreed by the council chamber, then when did the rules change and it's not happened? We want to implement it.
Councillor, did I say it wasn't happening? I didn't say it was happening. I said it's still under investigation.
Well, then
and it will be subject of a further report.
Can you give us a date?
Yes, it's not a debating point, Councillor Winter or Councillor Poulter. It's the question. Supplementary has been answered. So let's move on to the next question from Councillor Bayliss to Councillor Poulter. Councillor Bayliss, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Councillor Poulter. Could the Cabinet Member please let me and the residents of Ulverston know when the present Phase 3 works in Ulverston District Centre will be completed and when will be the start date of the next phase?
Thank you, Councillor Bayliss. The current phase of construction work at Ulverston is due to be completed in the next 8 to 10 weeks. The current phase of works is being funded from Growth Point. However, funding for the construction of future phases at Ulverston District Centre has not yet been identified. As you will be aware, the local transport funding has previously been used to carry out the improvements works at Ulverston. There remains significant financial pressure upon the local transport plan and other capital funding streams, and for the most part, improvements to district centres have relatively minor transport benefits compared with other mainstream transport schemes, although the wider regeneration and community benefits are recognised.
Supplementary, Councillor Bayliss, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you not agree that, from the Ulverston residents' point of view, this reinforces the belief that they were not only let down by the Liberals, they were being let down by the Conservatives in their simple desire to have this project completed? The condemned coalition is clearly not interested in Ulverston, and I shall assure you I shall tell the Ulverston residents on the doorstep at the next campaign. Thank you.
No, I don't agree.
Is from Councillor Bolton to Councillor Williams. Councillor Bolton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Yvonne. In light of the recent announcements by the coalition government, can the Cabinet Member tell me what implications this will have on our Building Schools for the Future programme for our 13 secondary schools?
18. Thank you, Sarah, for the question. The initial implications are that the sample schools, Noel Baker and St Martin's new build, which is 39 million of the PFI funding, and the refurbishment of Derby Moor, which is 20 million, is likely to go ahead. All other schemes have been stopped. We are currently awaiting a detailed response from Partnerships for Schools to fully understand implications in relation to Leesbrook as a Phase 1B scheme and the 25 million ring-fenced ICT funding. The implications of the announcement are now being considered, and discussions are also underway with Alpha Beta Education, Derby's LEP partner. Further updates will be provided in due course as and when we get the information. Thank you, Sarah.
Supplementary, Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you can imagine, this is of great disappointment to the head teachers who work extremely hard in this city, along with their senior leaders, to improve the environment for the children and young people that we serve. I've spoken to 3 head teachers this afternoon from secondary schools, and they are indeed flabbergasted by the response from the coalition government, and they're very disappointed, Yvonne. Many of them say that you haven't visited
Councillor
the schools
Bolton,
yet.
supplementary, please.
Can the Cabinet Member actually tell Council when she's going to get round to seeing the secondary schools, that the windows are falling out, the roofs are leaking, and the Cabinet Member hasn't even been to see them yet, and I think that's quite appalling.
Councillor Williams.
Councillor Bolton is in fact absolutely incorrect in her assumptions that I have not been to the schools. I can provide her with diary dates, details of visits, head teachers that I've talked to. I'll provide them all for you tomorrow morning, Sarah. You are wrong. The people that you might have talked to, I've not been given. I have got them in my diary all the way through to December. I've been here since May, and I have been visiting schools since then, children's homes since then, primary schools, senior schools, secondary schools. So I'm sorry, your information is absolutely wrong. In terms of the announcement, I also am gutted, and as such, I have written to Michael Gove to try and get him specifically to try and change his mind on Leesbrook. I've also written to our 3 city MPs to ask them to lobby on our behalf as well. So Sarah, I agree with you. I'm gutted. We were hoping that we would have gone through on those that have reached the preferred bidder stage. That wasn't to happen. We're 8 weeks away from signing to final closure, and I too share their disappointment. We are, however, still working with the heads of all the schools, and we will continue to provide that work in partnership to find solutions to the answers. And as you know, I was talking with the head teacher of Leesbrook just the other morning, and I gave him those guarantees as well.
Okay, next question is from Councillor Allen to Councillor Williams. Councillor Allen.
Councillor Allen, thank you very much for your question. According to information released by the Department for Education on the 28th of June, the following Derby schools have expressed an initial interest in academy status: Arboretum Primary School, Chellaston Foundation School, Mark Eaton Primary School, West Park School, Woodlands Community School and Wren Park Primary School. Of these schools, Chellaston and Wren Park are currently judged to be outstanding by Ofsted, so any application for academy status by these schools is likely to be successful. The Council is not directly involved in the process by which schools apply to the Department for Education for academy status, and therefore it's not possible to know with certainty at present which schools, if any, have actually applied. We have today received announcement and confirmation from the DFE that Chellaston has submitted an application. And that application has been applied for conversion to academy status for September 2010. Wren Park has indicated to the Council that they have no immediate intention of applying. West Park School and Mark Eaton Primary School are rated as good by Ofsted in their last inspections and therefore do not currently meet the criteria for September conversion to academy status. Woodlands School and Arboretum Primary School are rated satisfactory at their last inspections and so do not meet the criteria either. Furthermore, Arboretum Primary School has indicated that it has no immediate plans to apply for academy status. We believe that Derby schools and their chairs of governors are taking a considered approach, and we will remain supportive to all Derby schools regardless of their status. Yes, thank you very much. We have had confirmation actually from the government that any academies that are coming forward will have to comply with the schools' admission codes, the SEN code of practice, and will have to prioritise looked after children in their admissions arrangements, and we will work with these schools and academies to make sure that these are all applied by.
Next question is from Councillor Rawson to Councillor Marshall. Councillor Rawson, please.
Mr Mayor, you've missed question J out, sorry.
Oh. J, okay. So is Councillor Bolton to Councillor Williams?
Thank you. Yvonne, in light of the recent announcements by our coalition government, can the Cabinet member tell me what implications this will have on our Sure Start Children's Centre projects here in Derby?
Thank you again, Sarah, for your question. The current situation from the local authority's point of view on Children's Centre is business as usual. The Children's Centre Capital and Revenue budget sits within the Sure Start Early Years and Childcare Grant, which remains ring-fenced for the Children's Centre activity. Spend has been forecast until the end of March within the limits of the budget, and newly appointed staff have been appointed on short-term contracts up until the 31st of March. Partnership working to ensure core offer delivery continues.
Yeah, can I just say that I did visit 2 children's centres only yesterday, Mr Mayor, and I was amazed with how well they are being used by parents and carers, and obviously the vulnerable children that we serve in the city. I visited the Pear Tree one and the Meadow Farm one. Can I have some assurance that any capital projects that are going through, and I know there are several, particularly in Chaddesden Ward and the Arboretum Ward, can I have assurance that those new builds will take place, and also the improvements, particularly to Pear Tree School, where we are going to improve the children's centre over the summer holidays?
Thank you. I'd like to echo your comments on the Sure Start centres. I suppose I should declare an interest because I do use one every single day. My daughter goes to one and it's fantastic provision, and she's coming on in leaps and bounds. The assurances, I can give you the assurance that I will try my hardest to make sure that those go through. Thank you.
My apologies, Councillor Bolton, for not asking your question before. It didn't appear on my sheet, so I'm sorry about that. We now go back to Councillor Rawson to Councillor Marshall. Councillor Rawson, please.
Good evening, Councillor Marshall. Could the Cabinet Member please confirm that the Council has on file copies of valid insurance and MOT certificates and has conducted driving licence checks for all employees claiming business mileage?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Rawson. Great question. The Driving for Work policy was launched earlier this year. It requires managers to ensure that those employees who use their own vehicle for work and claim a car allowance have a DVLA driving licence, comprehensive motor vehicle insurance that includes business use for their vehicle, and a current MOT certificate where necessary. The policy does not require that copies of these documents are held by managers. This would be against data protection rules, as insurance documents may contain additional personal data, example, names of other drivers. Managers within all the directorates should have completed this checking exercise for 2010. And I've arranged a check to be done across all directorates to ensure that this is the case. As soon as I've received the information from directors, I will get back to Councillor Rawson, letting them know what the position is. Also, to add on to that, all the claims form for travel and subsistence by the employees, they all on the monthly statement, on the forms that they actually send in, there is a declaration on there that has to be signed each month to say that, and I'll just read out what it says. It says, I confirm that I hold a licence to drive and I'm not disqualified from driving. My car insurance is valid, covers me for business use, and provides for an indemnity to the Council against claims for insured losses otherwise covered by my insurance policy. Thank you.
Supplementary, Councillor Rawson?
Yes, thank you. I thank Councillor Marshall for his investigations, and hopefully once that information comes back it will show that those procedures are actually in place. A concern of the former Personnel Committee who looked at this in October last year was how we ensure that managers continue to implement the policy in such a large organisation.
Can we have the supplementary, Councillor Rawson, please?
I'm just coming to that, Mr Mayor. There was the concern about the implementing of it in the future in such a large organisation. Could the Cabinet Member tell us what checks he plans to put in place to enable the monitoring to go forward on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, like I said, it is all being done at the moment, and like I said, it was a great. It was one of the questions where I really, at the time I didn't know the answer to it, and when I found out, I realised obviously it really needs looking into and keeping an eye on. It's also worth noting as well on any council members present who claim mileage allowance to double check your insurance documents. That you're also covered for business use and not just social, domestic and pleasure. So it's just worth noting. I think it's about an extra £20 to add on if you don't have that already. So, but the answer to your question, yeah, I am looking at it and make sure it is implemented. So.
Councillor Rawson to Councillor Marshall. Councillor Rawson, please.
Thank you. Given the abolition of the Personnel Committee, how does the Cabinet Member propose to take forward the implementation of the single status pay review and job evaluation process?
Councillor Marshall.
Okay, thank you again for the question. The Job Evaluation Steering Group, which includes strategic representatives from the main trade unions in Derby, is continuing to work towards a jointly agreed solution and has recently agreed to appoint an independent auditor to review the draft results from evaluating all council jobs that we carried out using a national joint council scheme. Should any major policy decisions arise from this independent audit review, these would be referred to full council. Any budgetary implications would be referred to Cabinet if appropriate.
Supplementary, Councillor Rawson.
Thank you. Can I ask the Cabinet Member to give an assurance that he'll move forward in a constructive way, engaging with staff and trade unions to try to get an agreement that everyone can sign up to? And can I ask that he avoids the rather macho, uncompromising 1980s approach to negotiation and employee relations, which we've seen with the travel plan?
Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, you can have my assurance that we will look at that. Like I said, we just had a meeting on it recently. This has been going on for many, many years. And there's actually a room downstairs full of documents literally stacked to the ceiling on this. And a lot of the data is actually dated, really. So we're having a new independent auditor come in and review it. But, yeah, I'll take that on board anyway. So thank you.
Moving on, the next question is from Councillor Bolton to Councillor Grimmadale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can the Cabinet Member explain why it was necessary for him to instruct an officer to decline to discuss with me matters of routine information relating to our new Chaddesden Library?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, Councillor Bolton. I suggested that I would like to have a discussion with Councillor Bolton myself about the location for the new library at Chaddesden, as I, Councillor Marshall and Councillor Bolton have been instrumental in seeking a new library site for our ward. I wanted to consult informally with Councillor Bolton and myself on the proposals I was exploring in order to gain her response personally before taking the ideas further. Indeed, Mr Mayor, we had lunch together, sharing a combo for two and enjoying a couple of glasses of wine. Not on expenses, Mr Mayor. I paid and I enjoyed every minute. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton, supplementary, please.
It was a very nice lunch, actually. Can I just say that the officer concerned, and I didn't want to name the officer, has actually told that she did act improperly, and that shouldn't have happened. Clearly, Mr Mayor, when councillors ask for updates of legitimate projects in their ward, officers should not decline and say the Cabinet Member has told me not to talk to you. And that is exactly what happened on the telephone. And that is improper. And I hope, as this project moves on, and hopefully we will have a new library, that officers can talk to me directly. And in future, I hope, Councillor Grimmadale and indeed Councillor Marshall, we need to work together on this project.
Councillor Bolton, I'm asking you the third time your supplementary question, please.
Can I have an assurance that Councillor Grimmadale will not have a repeat performance and instruct officers not to talk to me about the library?
Councillor Grimmadale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Obviously, I'll do that, but I'd also like to continue taking Councillor Bolton out for lunch and explaining informally the Chaddesden Library. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Next question is from Councillor Redfern to Councillor Ingle. Councillor Redfern, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And can I welcome your advisor? I'm sure he will do an excellent job. My question is to Councillor Ingle. Could the Cabinet Member responsible tell us how much the refurbishment, decanting and survey of any other related costs have Exeter House incurred, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, Councillor Redfern. I won't be taking you out for lunch. I haven't got the money that Councillor Grimmerdale's got. Well, anyway, back to the question. £294,000 has been spent to date refurbishing these flats. Costs in relation to decant have been minimal since the existing tenants were moved into other flats in the complex. We expect the final figure to be about £450,000. This will then have upgraded 38 flats, including creating 5 new 2-bed flats. This represents an average cost of under £12,000 per flat. And as we expect these flats to be available for the next 15 years, I consider, and sure any sane person would consider, that's good value for money.
Supplementary, Councillor Redfern, please.
I do, Mr Mayor. Thank you. What improvements and measures have been taken to alleviate the high risk to tenants in Exeter House of the River Derwent flooding? This warning was given by the Environmental Agency to councillors in a briefing in this chamber as with regard to the flood zone called the Blue Corridor. I'm so mad about this, I think it's ridiculous. The exact words used were, "We have been extremely lucky so far not to incur severe, damaging floods in the city. Will we need to rely on our luck not running out?" Councillor Ingle.
Councillor Ingle.
I sincerely hope we won't have to have our luck running out. I'll get back to you on the other questions. Thank you.
Question is from Councillor Wambet to Councillor Poulter. Councillor Wambet, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good evening, Councillor Poulter. During my recent frontline service jobs as a street cleaner, a grounds maintenance worker and as a refuse collector, one of the major issues raised with me by my fellow workers was the lack of access to toilet facilities, especially for those who work outside the city centre. Can you please give me an assurance that you will investigate the problem by consulting the estimated 400 frontline council workers affected to devise and implement a policy that will allow them to access to all council buildings with a toilet, encourage businesses to make their premises available, and consider introducing public toilets where there is a need?
Councillor Poulter.
Thank you, Councillor Banway. Have a seat for a minute because you're looking a bit tired, all this work you've been doing. All the staff employed by the council who work outdoors in all parts of the city have access to all publicly available toilet facilities in the city. This affects workers, whether public sector or private sector, involved in this type of work, from roles such as grounds maintenance through delivery drivers and police officers on the beat. And it's not an unusual issue, and it's faced not just by the public sector, also by the council. Staff involved in these roles understand the practical issues and are aware that they are able to use publicly available facilities and can do so throughout their working day. This arrangement has existed and has been managed successfully for many years, and I think you do some of the workers a disservice because they do have the wherewithal to find the services that they need. Thank you.
Supplementary, Councillor Bonwell.
Mr Mayor, may I thank you for your concerns for my health, but I've got plenty of energy. I will be out with the highways maintenance tomorrow as well, so I'll certainly keep you updated about that. Duffield Road, actually. So, given that I have identified this issue by personally undertaking various frontline service jobs and speaking to fellow workers while on the job, when will you be spending a day as a street cleaner, refuse collector and grounds maintenance worker so that you too can see for yourself the issues firsthand?
Councillor Poulter.
I'm sure you'll be able to do that for me to an extent, Councillor Banway. But having said that, as a proper true Derby lad, for 10 years I pounded the beats of these streets, and I had to find the relevant services during night shifts and during 12-hour night shifts. So I'm sorry, but the toilet facilities haven't changed. I know what it takes to find out the necessary services, and there's no need for me to do that. Thank you.
Okay, moving on now. Councillor Wambet to Councillor Holmes. Councillor Wambet.
Thank you again, Mr Mayor, and good evening, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Holmes, you recently informed the press that the doors of Cabinet members were open to staff who wanted to discuss issues. In reference to that statement, can you please let me know how many frontline council workers, excluding management grades, have you and your fellow Cabinet members sat down with to discuss issues, and what specifically were their main concerns?
Thank you, Councillor Banwait, and good evening. The Conservative Cabinet is proud to have an open door policy for staff to raise any issue, concern or suggestion they may have in respect to their personal circumstance, department or the Council as a whole. This is regardless of their grade or type of work or what they do on behalf of the people of Derby. We also welcome staff, as we do members of the public, to contact us via home or work telephone, mobile, letter and email. Regarding specific details, I'm sure that you will understand that these discussions and correspondence are confidential. I would also like to take this opportunity to reaffirm that any employee would also be encouraged to raise concerns with their line manager. Thank you.
Supplementary, Councillor Banda?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I take that as none. In reference to that same press statement, you said that your administration, and I quote, are not looking to make frontline cuts. Given that at the time of this incredible statement, the Conservative and Liberal coalition government had already made public announcements that we can expect significant cuts to local government, what is your definition of frontline services? And where do you think the axe will fall, if not on those services?
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Councillor Banwait. Of course we're not looking to cut frontline services. Look, our doors are always open to shadow Cabinet members and every elected member in this chamber. If Councillor Banwait wishes to sit down and talk to me or any other Cabinet member about specific issues or concerns that he has on behalf of staff, we can arrange a time in the near future. Or we could do lunch. Thank you.
Could I have some order, please? Next question is from Councillor Nater to Councillor Grimmadale. Councillor Nater.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Evening, Councillor Grimmadale. Moorway Swimming Pool has been waiting for installation of steps so the elderly people with disabilities can access the pool. We have now been waiting 16 months, and part of that time was when I was as a Cabinet member. I understand they are now at the poolside and have been there for the past 3 weeks. Really, what I want to say is when and how long how further will it take for the work to be completed? And just to add on to that one, also, could you tell me if it's true that the 360 swimming is to stop at the end of July?
Councillor Grimmadale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Nater. The current steps at Moorway Swimming Pool are designed and built into the walls of the swimming pool, and therefore it requires the customer to use the handrails to support them entering and exiting the pool. The original plan was to install new permanently fixed steps into the pool. However, after various site visits and attempts by contractors at installing the new steps, the contractors weren't able to secure the fixed steps appropriately, given the current design of the steps and the pool. We have therefore ordered movable steps that can be manually fixed into a position and can be moved in and out of the pool. The fixing for the steps are to be finished this week, and poolside staff will be trained to position the steps so that they can be used safely from Wednesday the 14th of July. Regarding the swimming, the government have withdrawn the free swimming initiative as part of the number of national efficiencies and savings. In view of this, the Council is considering a number of options on whether it is able to maintain and extend the free swimming after the government has withdrawn the grant from the City Council. Thank you.
Supplementary, Councillor Nater.
Thank you, Councillor Grimmadale. The reason for me asking that question was to highlight some of the difficulties we as a council have and as members to do casework on behalf of the members. So really what I'm saying is that I hope you will sort of have a look at what we want to do.
Councillor Nater, can I have the supplementary, please?
Yeah. Basically, will you really look in detail if the over 60 swimming can be carried on? I know it's difficult times. I accept that.
Thank you, Councillor Nater. We will do everything we can to look into that. Thank you.
Next question is from Councillor Graves to Councillor Grimmadale. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Grimmadale. You will be aware that the big screen was installed in 2007 in readiness for the Olympics and supported in the main by all sides of the chamber. You'll be aware that one intention was to encourage wider participation of the watching of sport in general and popular events in particular. Yet one of your first decisions on this council was whether to include that little-known sport, the FIFA World Cup. I know that you came under a huge amount of pressure from concerned Derby residents, the local press and other councillors, yet you decided not to show this prestigious event on our big screen. You have cited that police costs were the main reason for this. Do you feel in hindsight that this important decision was indeed the correct one on this occasion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Councillor Graves. Yes, I do think that this was the right decision for this World Cup based on the fact that most games involving England were on Friday and Saturday nights. This was about ensuring the safety of the public and of our staff and contractors, and I'm happy to stand by the decision that was made. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I don't think they were all on Fridays and Saturday nights. But my question is, Councillor Grimmadale, do you think the big screen is actually a white elephant, and should it be dismantled?
Councillor Grimmadale.
No, I don't, and it won't. Thank you.
Question is from Councillor Shanker to Councillor Ingle. Councillor Shanker, please.
Councillor Ingle. I'm sure that you'll recall at an extraordinary full council meeting in 2008 when I proposed a motion that a permanent travellers site should not be built within the Osmaston Triangle. You and the whole of your current group supported this motion. As you'll be aware in your new cabinet role, that not one brick has yet been laid on the Russell Street development that the previous administration decided to pursue despite the motion duly being carried at full council. You must also be aware material circulated by your group during the last 2 election campaigns clearly stating your opposition to any proposed site within Osmaston. Therefore, can I be reassured that you will immediately and publicly declare that there are no plans to pursue the Russell Street development and instead concentrate officers' efforts to find an alternative site and vacate Glossop Street?
Thank you, Councillor Shanker. Can I just give you a bit of advice? Try talking into the microphone to see if people can hear you. It makes it a lot easier. Yeah, is that your age? Right, Councillor Shanker, thank you for your question. There are still many questions to be answered satisfactorily before any decision can be taken. Due to time constraints, these questions will have to be answered shortly, and once a final measure decision has been made, you will be informed.
Supplementary, Councillor Shanker?
Yes, I do. Is that any better, Councillor Ingle? No, right, okay.
Was that an invitation to lunch?
Okay, supplementary, Councillor Shanker, please.
Okay. Well, I'm sure Councillor Ingle didn't actually need the question because he did have it about 6 weeks ago and failed to answer it. Can you therefore confirm or deny the Conservative Group's position on whether there should be a permanent travellers site within Osmaston Triangle?
Councillor Ingle.
That was to Councillor Ingle, not Jennings.
Don't worry, the answer's still the same. Tell you what, we'll do lunch and discuss it, but the answer's no. Thank you.
Okay then.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Could I please have a? Can I please have a?
Sorry, Councillor Shanker.
Can I please ask?
Look, it's a supplementary question, and when the
and it's not been answered. It's not been
He
answered.
has answered it, so it's no
not been
debate on
answered.
that whether he's on. This is quite clear from the standing orders that once a supplementary question has been answered, there is no debate on that. So would you please sit down then? Okay, Councillor Turner to Councillor Poulter. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Poulter, good evening to you. At your recent Cabinet member meeting, you agreed to take the waste management contract with RRS to financial close, despite many valid arguments put forward by Councillor Shanker not to do so. You also publicly opposed such plants in residential areas just prior to the elections this year. Can you therefore explain your thought process
during the meeting in determining your decision?
Councillor Poulter.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Yes, I can. At the meeting on the 17th of June, I considered the information in both the open and the confidential reports. I listened to and carefully researched the evidence presented at the meeting by both officers and others, including Councillor Shanker. It was my view that the decision had to be taken to minimise the potential risks and to maximise the potential benefits in the contract to achieve the best possible value for the taxpayers of the City of Derby. I therefore resolved to accept the recommendations in the report.
Supplementary, Councillor Turner, please.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Given that explanation, and because your decision meeting was webcast, I recommend that you consider very seriously your answer to this question. Why then were you able to give your decision by reading from a pre-prepared script?
Councillor Poulter.
The answer that I gave, or the final decision that I gave and read out, was not fully pre-prepared. That's why I was able to do so, Councillor Turner.
Okay, can I have some order, please, in the public gallery? Councillor Shanker to Councillor Jennings. That's the final question. Councillor Shanker.
Councillor Jennings, you with many of your Cabinet colleagues appeared to support the anti-incineration campaign during 2009 and must have shared our delight when the Planning Control Committee rejected the proposed facility on Sinfin Lane. As leader of the Council, what reassurance to the people of Sinfin and Derby do you give that the Council will defend the democratic decision of its Planning Control Committee in this matter with all the necessary resolve and resource required?
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Shanker, thank you for the question. I think we're going back to a bit of what Dorothy brought in under public questions. But I can reassure you, Councillor Shanker, that the Council, in its role as a planning authority, is determined to resolutely defend its decision. A noted and experienced planning barrister has been engaged, as you heard earlier, to act as advocate at the appeal inquiry, which is scheduled for September. Indeed, one of my own members, Councillor Hickson, who at the Planning Control Committee proposed and advocated the refusal of permission, will be representing the Council and, as I understand, is presently preparing for the inquiry, assisted by officers and our barrister.
Supplementary, Councillor Shanker.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings. Could you therefore just clarify for me, are you and your group in favour of the waste treatment plant on Sinfin Lane or not?
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I can say, Councillor Shanker, is that we have been left in a position by the Labour group where decisions...
Order, please.
Where decisions taken in the past have left us with a situation where we are no longer in control of whether there will be...
Order.
We are no longer in control as a local authority of whether there will be or won't be a waste plant in Sinfin. That decision will now be taken by an authority not of this council. So...
Hold on, sorry, public, please.
So
can I have some order there?
So whether or not my group want or don't want a waste plant in Sinfin is not the issue, I'm afraid, any longer. It is now in the hands of the government planning inspector, and I'm quite sure he will make or she will make the appropriate decision.
Order, please, in the gallery. Requiring the approval of the Council. Item 12.10. Anybody wishes to speak on that? No. Item 24/10. Accommodation strategy Anybody wants to speak on that? Councillor Bayliss.
Yes, Mr. Thank you. Just to confirm, from following on from Cabinet last night, that the Labour Group no longer supports this strategy on the basis of the cuts that are coming in and the swinging cuts to services and jobs that we're going to be faced over the next months and years. And we think that this is unaffordable. And also, as Councillor Marshall tried to present the report very falteringly last night, you're going to have a situation, if you agree this, in 2 years' time you're going to have potentially a new building which the council employees, what's left of them, after this devastation wrought by the Condemns Alliance, is met upon them. And people in this city will not have services and someone won't have jobs. And how are you going to say that to them, to the electorate? So we think you ought to rethink this and spend the money more wisely.
Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, after presenting the report last night, it may seem a little strange to spend that amount of money refurbishing a council house. But like I said last night, over the years, and it's been, to be fair, cross-party, that it's ignored a lot of the maintenance over the years of the building. The building is in serious disrepair. We are at present, and this is not, as reported in the Telegraph, £14 million annually. It's £14 million bill to repair the building in its present state. It's actually sinking into the Derwent, and as I said last night, if it continues to go anymore, we'll be wearing flippers to work. So. And like I said, at the moment, we've got 500 employees that actually work in the council house. And we have employees scattered all over the city, which we're paying quite high rents for in different accommodations. And after the revamp, we'll be able to bring in 1,900 employees to work under one roof. So basically, it'll be a one-stop shop. You can come here and get everything that you need under one roof. Like I said, it would be quite easy to say, well, we're not going to do it. We'll leave it for another day type thing. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I thought it was my turn to speak. It would be quite easy to sweep this under the carpet and just say, forget about it, we're not going to do it on our watch, we'll pass it on, leave it to somebody else, which has been done for many, many years like that. But it's time to make a decision on it, and the decision has to be that we need to go forward and refurbish a council house. The building is just not fit for purpose for this day and age, really. Even today, like I said, it's hot in here, it's always hot during the summer, it's freezing during the winter. Economically, it's not viable. It costs us thousands and thousands of pounds to run. It's uneconomical. So in the long term, we're going to say, we should reap the money back in the long term. Also in the report, it does say about putting in an extra floor on the top. That was considered on the back of the contractors can actually add an extra floor onto the council building for just over £1 million. Okay, that can't actually be done later on, so it really needs to be done while the contractors are in. Now that floor, we can actually rent it out to a third party. We could probably get up to about £300,000 a year just for that floor alone. So, it makes economical sense, Mr. Mayor, in order to do it. Like I said, people have put it off in the past. We've taken control of the city now, and we're going to make the decisions, and we've made the decision, we're going to get the council house refurbished. Thank you very much.
Councillor Repton.
Mr. Mayor, under CP 62, I just wish to make a point. Last night's council cabinet debate, there was the £40 million figure, which was accurately reported in the Derby Evening Telegraph, but Councillor Marshall has now actually corrected the actual £40 million, finally. But the DET did actually report it correctly.
Councillor Repton, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The public in Derby will simply not understand if this decision goes through this evening, to spend millions of pounds on this building at the same time as denying schools right across the city of ours. Many hundreds of young people, thousands of young people, will be denied 21st century facilities, while this council makes sure it has a watertight roof over its head. It will deny young children the same. I also believe, with the swinging cuts proposed by your government, that's the Liberals and the Conservatives jointly, to remove some tens of millions of pounds, leading to up to 1,000 job losses in this city. How on earth can you predict the needs of this city council when come October there could be 1,000 job losses? I think you ought to be shameful for pushing through these job cuts that you're proposing to push through. I think you ought to be ashamed also to use scarce monies on this building whilst denying children the money that they need for their schools. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Naita.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think what you're seeing here is a Labour group that's in denial and defensive. Before they wanted to support the accommodation strategy, there was a part of the negotiations, and you know, everybody wanted to sign up to it. All of a sudden, we're talking about services being reduced. But I mean, this is actually a positive idea that to you know, refurbish the building. You know, so we can bring all the resources in together, and all the external offices that we've got out there, we can you know, do away with them, and all the accommodation comes internally. And really, you know, you can feel the vibe of such negativity instead of being positive about something, and there's money to be saved and efficiencies long term after this process is finished.
Order, please, in the public gallery. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't the right time to be presenting this report. In difficult economic circumstances that we find ourselves in, and the swinging cuts that are being imposed on us by the condemned government. In different times, yes, it's a different set of considerations to be taking into account and a different decision to be made. However, in the week that we've had the cancellation of the Building Schools for the Future programme, I really don't think that members of the public will understand a decision taken to award ourselves and council staff. We don't know how many job cuts there are going to be, so it's going to be difficult to plan exactly the size of the accommodation that we need. In a week when that's happening, how can we be making a decision to award ourselves in the council house shiny new accommodation and yet be denying children in many of our schools across the city the opportunity to be studying and learning in even remotely suitable accommodation? When we had the presentation in this chamber last week, Mr. Mayor, about the new accommodation, I asked the question about whether the council house is falling into the Derwent, which is a popular myth that a lot of people seem to think. And I was told by the architects that no, it's not. So I don't think there's any immediate urgency, as has been suggested, to make this decision. I would rather see the money invested into our schools and facilities for our children and young people. And it's not to say that the accommodation strategy can't go ahead in the future. I think everyone would accept that the accommodation in the council house does need looking at. But it's not the right time, and personally I would give priority to our children and young people and our schools.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and we've heard a lot of talk tonight about the cuts. Can I just point out that the cuts are the fault of the government that ran up the debt? And that also applies. We've heard a lot tonight about the maintenance bills. It's not just this building. The administrations over the years, mainly the Labour one, have cut maintenance year on year on year. We wouldn't need to rebuild some of these schools, nor the council house in such a hurry, if they hadn't cut the maintenance funding over the years. For me, the big issue of this building, its thermal performance is abysmal. It is completely non-DDA compliant. We're all suffering its disadvantages tonight. Let's get on and do it.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Roberts, let's listen to Councillor Roberts, please.
Thank you. Can I just say that I'd much sooner be a Labour Party member in denial than a Liberal Democrat in subservience. And let's be absolutely right. If you suck up to the Tories much more, Joe, you'll be sucked in altogether. I just listened to you tonight defending every lousy policy that the Conservatives are putting forward, and you know, Joe, you know,
You just are showing exactly where your true colours are. I remember when you used to say you were a socialist. Good God, thank God you left us. I can live with your snide remarks, but I can't live with you saying I'm in denial.
No interruptions.
I'm not denying anything about you. Now, let's just get this right. We're going to have a budget shortly, a meeting about the budget on the 28th of July. And that may well have swinging cuts in it that none of us are expecting. And nobody in this council can say exactly what it is. I don't suppose Don McClure could even say exactly what it is. Mind you, a very wise man. He's opting out as quick as he can. I don't blame him. And the fact is, we could wait until then before we make any such decision. And I would certainly say tonight, do not make a decision that locks this council in to an expenditure that will be totally unpopular with the people of Derby. Do not lock us into that before we know precisely what the cuts are going to be in the forthcoming budget.
I think we had enough debate on this one. Last speaker would be Councillor Wanbeth.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what we have here tonight is a real clash of ideologies. You have, on the right, the traditional Tories that have never been the friends of public services. They've never understood the concept of the role of local government. Just look at what they did in the 80s. They decimated frontline services. It took us decades to recover, and we're still recovering now. Look at our transport policy. They sold off the bus company, which could have been such a tremendous asset for Derby, and is, in fact, such a tremendous asset for Nottingham City Council. So let's make it quite clear, it's an unknown quantity for them. And I don't really blame some of the Conservatives here. They're just the lackeys of national government. Whatever's being passed down, they're copying it, paper for paper. I can just imagine Councillor Jennings with his excitement, sitting at his laptop with every bit of paper that comes from his ministers. Yes, we're going to implement that. Yes, we're going to cut that. We're going to cut this. And not thinking 1 minute the impact it's going to have on the residents of Derby, Mr. Mayor. And then on the other side, Mr. Mayor, ourselves, and I'm proud to say centre-left, because I am a socialist, and I know my comrades believe passionately in those values, we believe investing in those frontline services. That's where the investment should be. If all we're empowered to do is cut, 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 you can get a monkey to do that. And that's not our job as elected members, Mr. Mayor. We have the power in this chamber. We're politicians, for God's sake. We're not those officers on massive salaries that can go and chop and change and work for any city council as they please. And if we really believe in what we're doing, then we should have the courage of our convictions. And I challenge Councillor Jennings. I'm a simple man. And yes, and yes, Mr. Mayor. And yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I really, really appreciate that round of applause. And let me tell you about that simplicity, Mr. Mayor. I believe if you can't stand on somebody's doorstep and talk to them in a simple way and get them to challenge and values and policies that we're implementing in City Council, then we shouldn't be implementing them. I challenge Councillor Jennings and his colleagues to come with me in Bolton Ward. Come in Bolton Ward and talk to the residents on the doorstep and say to them the logic of spending £40 million on a council chamber for us so we can strut those corridors, look at those nice pictures you've got in this gallery, while the residents of this city, some of them are losing their homes, they're losing their jobs. You tell me, can you look them in the eye and say to them, yes, sorry you've lost your job, but by the way, we're going to spend £40 million on a new council building, plus we're now going to freeze jobs. I mean, can you believe what we're doing? These 800 jobs could be earmarked for some of those people losing their jobs out in the streets of Derby now. This city council has powers that we're not even tapping into. We've got officer there. We should be coming up with creative ideas. They get paid a tremendous amount of money. Put them to the test. Look, don't let them just sit there, do nothing. Put them to the test. Come up with some ideas. I had a chat with the chief officer. I says, look, it's income generation. You know, if you look at, you're big on looking at Canada as an example and Greece as an example in national government. Why don't we look across the channel and look at how other provincial councils in Canada and America are income generating? And I said to the officer, why don't we come up with some ideas? And you know what he said to me? He said, what ideas have you got? I said, well, hang on, I don't get paid over £100,000 a year. I work part-time in a bank, plus I do my duties as a councillor, and I work, incidentally, as a steward at Derby County to supplement my income. So, Mr. Mayor, the choice is quite clear. I offer that challenge. Councillor Jennings, come out with me this weekend in Bolton Ward, and let's go round. You can pick the houses, Mr. Mayor. Let's do that this weekend, Councillor Jennings. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. I didn't realize Councillor Jennings has indicated to speak. I didn't see him. So, Councillor Jennings, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was one word from that last contribution which was quite relevant, and that was contempt. And I think the contributions from the Labour bench have just been exactly that, contemptible. The Councillor Williamson.
No interruptions, please. Councillor Van Beth, no interruptions, please. Councillor Van Beth, no interruptions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Labour group have drawn a line in the sand, basically, and what they're saying to the members of the public out there at the moment is, we don't want to invest in our city. We don't want to create jobs. We don't want to see. We don't want to see.
I want a personal explanation, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Jennings knows quite well that we weren't saying that. We're saying that whether to spend on council house or spend on schools, and it's full.
It's just another example of the contemptible nature of some of the Labour councillors that are here to represent the electorate. I think, Mr. Mayor, that we have to recognise that by refurbishing the council house, that we will be providing job opportunities for local tradesmen at a time during the recession when they need that work. We will be providing that work in the city centre. I think that we have to recognise that the council house is in a state where it badly needs work. It is not DDA compliant and cannot be made DDA compliant, which we are required to do under legislation set by the last Labour government. I think that we have to recognise, Mr. Mayor, that the advantage of bringing another 1,400 potential council workers into one office accommodation will potentially save us millions of pounds in the long run. And it is about investing for the future. And the last thing I'd like to say, Mr. Mayor, on some of the Labour contributions that have come out this evening, and indeed that have appeared in the press over the last few days and indeed on television, are absolutely scandalous, in my opinion. When they shut up, Dorothy, please.
Well, could I just ask in the public gallery to be in order, please? Otherwise, I will have to clear the gallery. I'm sorry about that. No more heckling, no more these interruptions. I would ask the gallery to be cleared if that happens again. You heard me what I said, didn't I? So please stay in order.
I think, Mr. Mayor, to carry on, if I can, without any... If I can carry on without further interruption, Mr. Mayor, I think that, like I said, some of the articles that have appeared in the press on behalf of the Labour group, where they're actually scaremongering. Who has said that there are 1,000 job cuts coming? Who has said that? You have, not us.
I did.
Well, actually, and I just don't see how you can justify that without having the evidence in front of you, and I just do think that it's scaremongering tactics, and it's very insensitive to the members of staff. So I'd just like to make that point, and I would recommend this particular accommodation strategy to Council for approval, Mr. Mayor.
Item 27/10. Anybody wish to come?
Mr. Mayor, just before we start, please, can I just make an amendment, a proposal to the Chamber on this item? On item 1, it says that the recommendation from Cabinet to Council is to agree that with immediate effect we implement a vacancy freeze on all external recruitment below Tier 3. I would actually like to remove the words below Tier 3. It is my intention to implement that freeze from Tier 1 down. There will be a couple of exemptions to that we will have to add on to the list after this meeting, but the intention is to do a top-down freeze.
Councillor Bayliss.
Chair, can I just, before we go on to the debate about that, we need to have a seconder to that amendment, and then we need to vote on that amendment.
Seconded? Yeah. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. Any against? That's carried. Councillor Bayliss now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand why this is being done, and for the record, it was, as I said, it was me who said that there's going to be over 1,000 job losses in this authority, and I think that's a small c conservative estimate, based on the fact you've cut in the budgets by 30%. You've got 12 million staff, and you cut in the budgets by 30%. It's not difficult to do the mathematics. On the substantive point regarding the vacancy control, I'll reiterate the point I made yesterday to Council Cabinet. There is a appeal system in this. It's on page 8, section paragraph 15, which I am very concerned about, because I think it's one of those things that, for me, is an ethical framework and a probity issue. You've got a situation where you're setting a Council Cabinet member who's an elected member of the City Council, and you're going to give 3 officers in this meeting a vote. I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong for a number of reasons. I think it's wrong to put officers in a position where they could be potentially being asked to, on the basis of their professional judgment, vote against their employer and the elected member. And I don't think any of them will be brave enough to do so. So I think it's a bit of a nonsense. I think that's something that this Council in the past has avoided. We had the similar sort of issue when we were talking about area panels. And we avoided that quite neatly by making sure that officers weren't put in that position where they could be voting for or against issues that were raised by members of the public and elected members. I think that's wrong. Plain wrong. I accept that you might need an appeal process. I just think the way you've got it set up is just wrong. You can't put officers in that position. I think you need to rethink that part of it. And I'm saying that because I genuinely think you've got a problem with that. Despite the idea that I was told yesterday there'd be an independent strategic director, it doesn't matter. It's the issue about having officers and members with the same level of voting power in the same meeting. I suspect you'll never get to the point, but I think it's a wrong thing to do, and it's a wrong precedent to set. And I think you need to think about that. And I commend that when this thing is voted through, and the Labour Group will be voted against the motion at the bottom of the page, you actually go back and revisit that, because I think you've got an issue with that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Council Cabinet dated 8 June and 6 July 2010. Councillor Janning.
Mr. Mayor, I move the motions as amended.
All in favour, please show. Recorded vote. It's going to be a recorded vote.
Will members please indicate whether they are for or against the motion, or whether they are abstaining as I call out their names. Councillor Allen. Councillor Ashburner. Councillor Atwell. Councillor Banwaite. Councillor Barker. Councillor Bayliss. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Carr. Councillor Shearer. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dinser. Councillor Graves. Councillor Grimmadell. Councillor Harwood. Councillor Hickson. Councillor Higginbottom. Councillor Holmes. Councillor Hussain. Councillor Ingle. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jennings. Councillor Fahadra Khan. Councillor Shiraz Khan. Councillor Lowe. Councillor Marshall. Councillor Nater. The Mayor, Councillor Nath. Councillor Poulter. Councillor Radford. Councillor Rawson. Councillor Redfern. Councillor Repton. Councillor Richards. Councillor Roberts. Councillor Shanker. Councillor Skelton. Councillor Troop. Councillor Tuplin. Councillor Turner. Councillor Webb. Councillor Whitby. Councillor Williams. Councillor Williamson. Councillor Fay Winter. Councillor Linda Winter. Councillor Wood.
For the motion 26, against 18, the motion is carried. A. Appointment of Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Health. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to move that Councillor Roy Webb be appointed Council Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Health in place of Councillor Hickson for the remainder of the current municipal year.
Is that seconded? All those in favour, please show. Any against? Councillor Webb is now the Cabinet Member.
Can I thank Council for granting me this position? Can I also thank Rolls-Royce for allowing me the time to do this position? I hope I can do it justice.
Item 10, to consider the following minutes and recommendations of the Audit and Accounts Committee dated 24th June 2010, requiring the approval of the Council 12/10. Anybody wants to?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to propose the motion as printed. Thank you.
In favour, please show. Any against? Is carried. Item 11, to consider a report of the strategic director of the Resources on Governance.
Mr Mayor, can I request that I alter this motion before it's debated with the amendment that I've submitted to all political groups in advance of this meeting? You should all have a copy of the amendment for this agenda item.
Is there a seconder for that? Yeah, okay. Yeah. You wanted to speak to on this motion, Councillor Bayliss?
I wanted to answer the Leader of the Council's question.
Just a second, Councillor Bayliss.
I'm sorry, we just have to vote on that amendment, Chair.
Okay.
Oh.
All those in favour of that amendment, please show. Against? Carried. Motion is carried. Councillor Bayliss, you want to speak on the motion as amended?
Yes, unfortunately, I'd like to have spoken before we actually went to the vote. As the motion was printed in the order paper, the Labour group would actually had no problem in supporting it. Issue was, and now it's in the past, the amendment that's been made to this predetermines the Council's position, and we thought that we should allow the citizens of Derby to at least have a discussion on the future governance arrangements. Certainly within the Labour Party there is some debate about which way forward, and we as a group and a party haven't debated it. And I thought we should actually have that educated, mature debate with the citizens of Derby over the next few months. However, Council has decided that it's going to make its mind up and not ask the citizens, which I find odd. Particularly the Liberals in the past always wanted to look at different voting systems and give people an opportunity to consider the way they want to be represented. And particularly ironic that we've got a referendum coming up in next May. So it is very sad that the Council has decided to take the decision that it has tonight and not allow people to have a full and frank debate within the parameters set about the way they wish to be governed. For the record, I am not in favour personally of an elected mayor, but I think we should actually have the opportunity to have that discussion and make the case to the citizens of Derby. I think there is an issue about whether we should be elected all out every 4 years or by thirds. Certainly within my party there's a debate about that, and I think we should have had that debate with the citizens of Derby and actually had the opportunity to talk to them about it and make the case or not. So I think this is another unfortunate sad day for democracy in that we've narrowed down the choices and the elements we wish to debate, and there was no political point scoring to be had in not having that full and frank debate with the citizens of Derby, treating them as adults, giving them the facts and having a debate with them. What had we to lose? Only a greater engagement of the public, that we often at election bemoan the fact they don't turn up to vote for councillors. A very low turnout. Well, maybe this is an opportunity to have that debate. They understand the system. We put our points of view together and we come up with a conclusion. Now we find that that's very much restricted and very much regrettable. I think that, well, I understand why it's been done. It's one of those things that it appears to be that the condemned party are frightened to have that debate, which I found strange, but there you go. So it's a very regrettable position we find ourselves in tonight, Mr Mayor, and one that the Labour group deeply regrets we didn't have the debate to start with. Thank you.
Councillor Nater.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Bayliss has just spent 3 minutes explaining that there's no consultation, nobody's been asked. All he had to do was read bullet point number 3 on the motion, and it would have answered his question. Thank you.
Anybody else wishes to speak?
Yeah, CP 62, Mr Mayor, standing order of personal explanation. If you look at the original motion, the debate was about a directly elected mayor and cabinet, and regarding the leader in cabinet. So I suggest, Councillor Nater, you read it first.
Okay. Could I then ask Councillor Jennings to wind the debate up on this particular motion, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm quite surprised when Councillor Bayliss said that his group had not debated this issue. The papers were circulated quite a while ago, and indeed I invited both of the leaders of the other groups to have that discussion with me surrounding what they thought, what their group's view was on this matter. I don't think it's been a case of trying to stifle the debate. I think the opportunity was there for the groups to have that debate and make their indications known. So the majority of the indications that were given to me indicated that this would be the way forward. So I'm sorry if you feel that this has stifled the debate, but the opportunity is still there for the public consultation, as Councillor Nater has quite clearly pointed out in paragraph 3. It does still have to be consulted on. So I recommend the motion as amended to Council for approval, Mr Mayor.
All those in favour of the motion as amended, please show. Any against? The motion is carried. Item 12. First of all, I would like to welcome Mr. Sunderland to this council meeting, and he is here as the chair of the Standards Committee, and under this item we are just to receive the annual report of the Council Standard Committee for the year 2009/10 municipal year. Mr. Sunderland, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor, councillors. The report of the Standards Committee summarises the work. The report you've got in front of you summarises the work of the committee over the past year or so. As has been demonstrated here tonight, Derby has a strong tradition of robust debate. This is to be applauded so long as the debating continues as far as the topic in hand rather than the councillor individually. Over the last year or so, the committee has dealt with a number of complaints, and there is a comparison at the back with one or two other authorities locally. However, I don't regard this necessarily as a bad thing, because there's a significant number of complaints, because a lot of them were not pursued beyond the initial investigations. We've been supported over the year by representatives from each of the political groups, and I would like to thank them and my fellow independent members for the fair and impartial manner in which business has been conducted. For the future, the coalition government has indicated they will abolish the standards regime. As yet, with no indication exactly what this will mean for individual authorities. However, I hope it will not send out the message that anything goes as far as members' behaviour is concerned. As a committee, we will be seeking to improve the way in which we carry out our business to reduce any delays in dealing with any cases, ensure that all protocols in existence are fully understood by all members of council. And as such, the independent members will continue to meet with the political groups to ensure that whatever future standards hold, that standards will remain high within Derby, within the city of Derby. Thank you.
The motion is to receive the annual report of the Council Standard Committee for the year 2009-10 municipal year. Do we accept the report? Thank you very much. So we did say that item 13 would be taken after the item 14 and 14(1)(a). So if we could move to item 14. To consider the following notice of motion deferred from the 26th May 2010 meeting. Councillor Carr to move, Councillor Skelton to second. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mayor. For some time now, it has been obvious that our scrutiny arrangements were in need of a bit of an overhaul. This motion, if passed, will align our scrutiny commissions directly with the strategic directorates. This will focus each commission's work clearly on the business of that directorate and in a very strategic way, which I submit is the purpose of scrutiny. The subject of climate change and that commission has been raised with me. Climate change is within the Chief Executive portfolio, and will therefore be scrutinised by the Scrutiny Management Commission, which I chair. This will enable climate change to have an even greater degree of scrutiny and remain at the forefront of our business. There is a motion following which refers to co-option onto the Climate Change Committee. If Council feels the need to continue with this practice, then the SMC can equally well co-opt where it is felt that this will add value. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Skelton, you want to speak?
Mr. Mayor, I formally second and reserve the right to speak later. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Labour Group will be voting against this motion. Not that against the principle of reducing or changing the scrutiny commissions. I just think, as I've said before, that the change to scrutiny commissions should be something that scrutiny should decide for itself. And I think that's something that they ought to decide. We also think there ought to be a focus on climate change. It's potentially the biggest challenge we have to our economy, our way of life and lifestyles. And we certainly think with climate change it's one of those things that is something that we ought to have a special view on. I note the comments by Councillor Carr, but I mean there's been quite a lot of lobbying behind the scenes regarding whether or not we should have people co-opted for their climate change credentials. I certainly think Peter Robinson is one of them. But on the idea of the Council dictating to scrutiny without scrutiny itself having debate, I think that's fundamentally wrong. It's quite an arrogant position to have, and it also presumes that Mother knows best, whereas we, as the front bench councillors and the people on the Cabinet, are people that don't get involved in scrutiny anymore. So why should we be telling other members the way to organise themselves? I think this particular motion, which was deferred last time, is one that's been driven quite some time by officers wishing to reduce the number of meetings that they have to attend and staff. I should remind them that we employ them, and we are in turn employed by the electorate as their representatives. And if we think climate change is important, which we in this group do, then we ought to have a special commission to look at it. So, with some regret, we will be opposing this, and hopefully people on the other side of the room may support us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Shanker.
Thank you. I'm rather suspicious as to why this motion has come forward this evening from the minority group on the Council. If they were so unhappy with the structure, why they didn't get this through during the 2 years they were in control. The Liberals, although thrown out of office, should I say, by Derby's electorate, seem absolutely determined to act as the messengers or the lapdogs of senior officers of the Council. Having had 2 years in power, they still do not appear to have grasped the concept of democracy, that they should be leading policy for Derby based on the people who have elected them and not just following the whims. This is a member-led authority and it should remain that rather than letting the officers tell them what to do. And now they seem to have new leaders, or masters should I say, in the Conservative group. We have a corporate structure, a strategic structure for this Council, which the Chief Executive and officers have determined. They think that's best suits to manage and carry out their duties. We also have a Cabinet structure, which the leader and the controlling group have proposed and gone through Council. Neither of these are fully aligned, nor do they need to be fully aligned. They both bodies have their distinct and unique requirements, and this is, what's been agreed. So why this sudden urge to align the Scrutiny Commission or the scrutiny structure to the directors makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I think it's not by coincidence or chance that this motion removes the Climate Change Commission. It's another deceptive trick by the Tories and supported by the Liberals and supported by the desperate Tories to remove a challenging part of scrutiny management that they just can't be bothered with. Having served on the Commission since being elected, I know the important work carried out by the Commission and do admit, particularly in the year the Commission was chaired by Councillor Williams, of the effective work it did. This year again, we've already come up with a full and challenging work programme that demonstrates the importance of this Commission, but also the significance of the whole climate change agenda. The work programme covers a number of key issues that need to be looked into that will help the Council reduce its carbon emissions. If we are to reduce carbon emissions, then we need to do so responsibly and commit to do so and make sure climate change remains at the top of the political agenda. Signing up to a 10-10 campaign just because Nick Clegg was visiting Derby the day after is just not good enough, especially when the details said we're actually reducing our emissions by 3%. The Tories, by appointing the biggest denier of climate change on the Council to the Climate Change Commission, have demonstrated their lack of any real resolve to deal with this issue. Double-page spreads in the Telegraph by the Deputy Leader will not convince us of his commitment either. Actions speak louder than words. One thing I'm already glad that the Climate Change Commission has achieved is the biggest denier of climate change at the last meeting has now denied he's a denier. So that must be a positive step. Therefore, Mr Mayor, I've passed an amendment to the officers and like to propose that amendment, which would keep or change the structure as this we reluctantly support as suggested in this motion, but also to retain the Climate Change Commission.
Is the motion in order? Amendment?
Chair, if I can just clarify with Councillor Shankar, I understand that his proposed amendment is to add the following words to the end of the motion. And those words are, and the retention of the Climate Change Commission to maintain focus on this vitally important issue. Has that got a seconder? So now needs to be any debate on that particular amendment, Mr Mayor, and then a vote on it.
You want to speak on the amendment, Councillor Shankar?
I'll formally propose the amendment as amended.
You want to speak on the amendment, Councillor Roberts?
I formally second and reserve.
Anybody wishes to speak on the amendment? Those in favour of the amendment, please show. All those against the amendment, please show. Amendment is lost. Anybody wishes to speak now on? There was quite a few people speak on the motion. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Councillor Shankar has just referred to the article in the Telegraph. Well, I rather foresaw that this would happen, so I kept it. I kept the newspaper, and it's here. And there's 2 pages, just a week after the Conservatives had dealt and willed their way to power, instead of legitimately winning it at the ballot box, but however. It says, Matthew is leading from the front in our drive to make the city greener. With great power comes great responsibility. Councillor Matthew Holmes, the Deputy Leader of Derby City Council and the new Cabinet Member for, wait for it, Climate Change, Energy and the Environment, understands this idea. He said, and he did a lovely, delightful daughters on here, and he says, management principle, our manifesto was all about finding ways for everybody, the council, local businesses and residents, to reduce their energy usage so that they can be more green and always save money. I want to lead from the front, and if that means getting my hands dirty, then so be it. Good for you. And he also lives in a 4-bedroom house at Mickleover, which takes a lot more energy than my 2 up, 2 down in Stinfin. But that's beside the point. Well, it's now the controlling group's commitment to climate change, and with breathtaking hypocrisy, they abolish a scrutiny commission devoted to this very subject. I've no children and therefore no grandchildren, but I do have a great niece and nephew and another one on the way, and I care about the future of this planet. and after I have long gone. The Climate Change Commission was one way this Council could display their commitment to this important subject, and I am concerned about this issue, that it will be lost in other scrutiny commissions. It won't have the focus it should. So I ask the Conservative group to seriously think about what they're doing.
Councillor Ingalls.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was quite surprised to hear Councillor Shanker speak for so long on climate change. I was the very first chair of the Climate Change Commission. I was the last chair of the Climate Change Commission for a full year, and at one point Councillor Shanker was the vice chair, and he was on it for a while, and that's the most he ever said. I'm quite shocked, to be honest with you. Yeah, well, you're not wrong, are you? You're not wrong. I think that climate change needs to be made more mainstream. It needs to become part of what we do and what we think all the time. This needs to move in line with the Commissions so that we as members are challenging the Council at every level, on every Commission, of what they're doing on climate change. Now, I appreciate that the Climate Change Commission did some excellent work, and I commend the officers for the work they did, but I think that expertise now needs to go into all the Commissions. Don't forget also, we still have the Climate Change Board, which I'm hoping to chair. We're not quite sure if I'm allowed to yet, but I will definitely be sitting on it, and that will also be moving forward. So, yes, this is lost, this is gone, but I think the right thing to do is make it more mainstream and get more power into the Climate Change Board, which can do more work. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got a couple of points that I'd like to make. The first is that during this evening there have been a lot of references to officers, and officers cannot defend themselves. We've heard members opposite shout at officers about getting ideas, yet when we were in control they castigated us because they thought we were officer-led. Now they seem to have adopted that principle. And I wonder, Mr Mayor, whether you could give us some guidance of what members can say about officers in this chamber. The second point I'd like to make was a few weeks ago, after the election results, the Labour leadership came to see us, that's Councillor Jones and myself, asking us for our support for their administration. One of the things they discussed was the difficulty they had in servicing the commissions, and they would be willing to consider the reduction in the number of commissions. Perhaps they didn't discuss that with their membership. And the third thing, Mr Mayor, is they're making quite a lot of being eco-friendly and climate change and all the rest of it. Can I just remind Council that when they had the opportunity to keep environmental friendly issues in the Quad building, they took them out?
Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think what I will say that it is important to keep a very clear focus on climate change. And to that end, I think it is very important that the whole issue is discussed within all of the commissions, not just pigeonholed into one commission as it has been. And certainly I can speak for the Adult Services and Health and Housing Commission, that if this motion does pass this evening, we would be very happy, I'm sure, to consider at our next meeting whether we should co-opt onto the Commission someone who has a keen interest in climate change and also a keen interest in the subject matter of that Commission. And I'm sure that the chairs, no doubt vice chairs of those other commissions as well, would feel similarly, and at least I hope they would. Thank you.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. Can I just respond to the point made by Councillor Allen? He's absolutely right. We did ask the Liberal Democrats for support for our taking control of the council. And he's probably right that we did say we might have to make some accommodations because we hadn't got enough people to undertake all of the roles that are necessary. But, of course, like everything else, we don't hear all the story, do we? Perhaps he recalls him and his leader saying that they were prepared to give us, in the event of it being necessary, enough support to keep the Tories out. Now, have we forgotten those little niceties? And I can see Councillor Allen there shaking his head, but we know the truth of the issue, so it doesn't make any difference. The fact is, and it's very easy for Councillor Ingle to say that what we should do is roll out the climate change issues to all of the commissions, and I actually think that that's not a bad idea. But what it does do then is take away the focus of the Climate Change Commission, which has been doing a very good job over the last few years to focus in on issues that can then go to other departments of the Council and be considered. And it is not, to me, a sensible way of operating to say to the people who come in as our partners on the Climate Change Commission, and we've almost had one of those on for the shortest period ever, but we skipped by it with Paul Robinson there. But the fact is, if we sit here in a situation where we look at the Climate Change Commission and we invite people in, we take it away and say we're devolving that between all the other commissions, we then have to say that the people who have come to the Climate Change Commission cannot attend all of those commissions. We're saying we haven't got enough people. For goodness sake, how on earth do you think our partners from the outside can come along and support what this council is doing? And whilst I did note that Councillor Jennings, in one of his articles about the RRS contract, said he was leaving it to Councillor Poulter because he was his expert on the matter, I wonder how on earth the 4 Cabinet members and the 4 chairs of the Overview and Scrutiny Commissions will now get the kind of expertise that the people come in from the outside bring in. And it is totally unfair, in my view, to say to those people, you must now attend 4 different commissions. And on that basis, I would ask people to vote against this motion, because what it does, it takes out one of the most valuable commissions we've got, and one of those that can actually achieve something that has total cross-party support in its aims and objectives. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it might just be worth going through what we pledged to the people of the city prior to the elections. We said a Conservative Council will recognise its commitment to reducing the impact we have on the environment, along with reducing our energy consumption, recognise that being green should not necessarily mean that the public must pay more for services or be hit with extra costs or taxes, refocus the Council's efforts towards the implementation of schemes that present proven savings and that offer best use of public funds, work to be more energy efficient, to cut our carbon emissions, and to be committed to the use of recycling schemes, work towards the use of renewable energy systems and technology, and consult and work with the public when making decisions. I ask, what's wrong with that? We've reaffirmed our commitment tonight by announcing a new eco-library for Chaddeston, for example. And finally, yes, I am willing to lead from the front, despite ridicule from the Labour benches. Thank you.
Councillor Troop.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As the member that's been appointed to chair the Climate Change Commission for this year, I guess I'm the one here that's got the most to lose in this. I thought it was really great to see so many people interested in campaigning on this issue. It's only right that people should have the opportunity to do that, and I think it's really good that so many people are obviously so concerned about this that they're willing to protest about it. During the reorganisation of the Council, we tried very hard to make climate change the responsibility of the Chief Executive. We considered this to be such an important issue that it should be the top man that's be responsible for it. And we're very pleased for that to actually happen. This change in the scrutiny structure will make it even more obvious that it's the Chief Executive that's responsible for this, because it's his commission that's going to be scrutinising what he does on this. And I don't see it as a diminution of that. I think it promotes climate change to be very clearly a top priority of this Council and the responsibility of the top man to deliver. And we hope that the scrutiny commissions will make sure that happens. Having said that, I do agree with Councillor Skelton that every commission should consider in its work programme the issues of climate change and how it affects the work that they do. Thank you.
Order, please, in the gallery. Order. Order, please. Please, order. Order, please. I'm sorry to say, if you do that next time, I will send the person around and you will be asked to clear the gallery. I'm sorry about that. This is the 6th or 7th interruption you have done now. Okay, Councillor Redfern, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have several debates in this council chamber, but at the end of the day, it's already been decided how we're going to vote. You are going to vote with your group. We are going to vote with ours. But what has been decided in this council chamber this evening is that we spend an awful lot of public money. Millions. Millions on a new council house. Refurbishing the council house. Now, I think that that's worth a further investment, because it's been sold to us on the grounds that it's better for the environment. It's too cold in winter. It's too warm in summer. We need to get the best that we possibly can out of the energy sources that are available to us. Yet we can't have a climate commission with a designated purpose of steering through, of scrutinising and checking on the building progress and all the tools, maintenance and refurbishment that that's going to take, and we haven't got a commission to look at that expenditure and check and report back to us. I think that that's a shame. And I think for the time being, and in the manner that this council works, I think that it would be an opportunity for all three parties to work together to ensure that the public money is spent well and it achieves what has been voted for in this council chamber this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Bambat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have the same Conservative manifesto here, and I wouldn't put great confidence in anything they say when the opening statement says, "We recognise that you want a clear choice when casting your vote, and so we firmly pledge not to enter into any alliance or pact with any other group after the elections." This isn't a manifesto, it's Jackanory.
Councillor Higginbottom. Councillor Carr to wind up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a hot evening, so I won't take very much time. The issue, the particular point I want to pick on is the one Councillor Bayliss raised about whether or not the scrutiny decides that or Council decides that. We've had that debate on several occasions. It's a completely circular argument. That's why I've brought this motion. We've tried to do this in the past and it's been kicked into scrutiny. We've tried to do it in the past and it's come back to the Council. So in the end, we decided the best thing to do, because I'm at risk of getting some ribald comments, it's also a simple person, and to me it seems perfectly straightforward. We've got 5 strategic directorates. We're going to have 5 scrutiny commissions to examine them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Motion, please show. All those against, please show. Motion is carried. Item 14.1a, which is if the motion at item 14.1 is passed to make appointments to revised overview and scrutiny commissions. I understand the nominations have been received for these overview and scrutiny commissions, and I will ask Mr. Leslie to advise us on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in anticipation that that last motion may get passed, we have been to the various parties and asked for nominations to the revised overview and scrutiny commissions, and we have received those from the Conservative Party and from the Lib Dem Party, and those are currently being circulated to members. We have not as yet received anything from the Labour Party.
Councillor Bayliss.
Yes, the nomination for the Labour Party will be forthcoming after our group meeting on Monday.
Is that acceptable? So the motion is to approve the nominations as at present, and then on Monday the nominations from the Labour group will come forward. Is that agreed? Yeah, thank you very much. Notice of motion submitted for this meeting. Councillor Banbet to move, Councillor Jackson to second. Councillor Banbet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly during my local election campaign, residents overwhelmingly on the doorstep mentioned a growing issue of dog fouling. I'm sure that we can all agree on this one, that dog fouling is not only an environmental hazard, but it's an absolute disgrace that we allow or stand by and allow decent dog owners to have their reputation ruined by the minority that continue to allow their dogs to foul public highways and our public parks. So this is certainly an issue that has been raised to me in my own ward, Mr. Mayor, and certainly many of my colleagues in the Labour group find it as a growing problem. And really what this motion is calling for is that we think is to highlight this as a problem and calling upon the council to run some sort of campaign. I mean, obviously I'll leave that to the cabinet member to decide how he wants to progress that, but really to highlight the problem to the people of Derby and ask for support from the council, whether it's I mean, I know in this current climate things are very tight at the moment, but certainly asking support from the cabinet member in terms of increased signage, more support for the dog wardens, increased patrols. I think I would certainly welcome that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Councillor Banwait's really said it all, that yes, it has been brought up many times in the campaign, before the campaign and since the campaign. We have ourselves run our own campaign about dog fouling in the area to try and make people aware. We've leafleted and spoken to people and just tried to make them take some responsibility for this matter. For my part, I've requested 2 dog bins from the Bolton Neighbourhood Forum to see if we can help that way and have them in Bolton Lane particularly, where there's a lot of activity because there's a lot of green space. But as Councillor Banwait says, we really need more than this. We do need a little more help and support from the council and more resources putting into either dog wardens or just a citywide campaign to make people aware of this situation. Thank you very much.
Councillor Poulter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Banwait, yes, I too had people mention this on the doorstep to me. I've also seen it in the results of the Pointer panel, and I've also seen it in the results of my local neighbourhood board, who have made it a high priority for themselves. So what I did, and what my fellow councillors did in Spondon, was to organise a local campaign in the areas where it was necessary. We bought and we distributed, and we spent days out there distributing the green bags that are available for disposal of of dog poop. At the end of the day, this was an area I hadn't got a lot of experience in, so I actually went and borrowed, well, mainly because I don't have a dog, so I borrowed one. I went out and borrowed one for the day and walked around with it, and he explained that he hadn't got the same facilities that even human beings had got. But anyway, we went out there, we spent days out there, and we responded to the local issues in the areas, in our own local areas where there were specific problems, and I would encourage you and the neighbourhood boards to do the same. And I would hope that the neighbourhood boards would consider themselves as an extra resource to be able to try and tackle this issue. Just as an aside, we have already spoken to officers, with a view to instigating a citywide campaign, Barbara.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with this motion. The only ironic thing for me is that in the past, when the Labour Group were in power, I tried several times to get these increased resources and was turned down. I fully support this motion.
Councillor Toplin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not very often that I actually take the opportunity to say I agree with a Labour Party motion, so I thought it was only proper that I say formally to Ranjit that on this occasion I do agree with you and I will vote for this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Banbat, you want to wind it up? Favor of the motion, please show. At least for once it's unanimous. Okay, the next motion again, Councillor Wambert to move and Councillor Bayliss to second. Councillor Wambert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We brought this motion because the Labour Group is totally against this administration, this council, spending any further taxpayers' money on private sector consultants to show officers how to save money. We think it's absolutely unacceptable. Politics is about, we've heard it's cliched, a week's a long time in politics, but also another favourite one of mine is politics is all about timings. And a lot's happened in the last year since, and I go back, just a bit of background on the DCATS programme, going back to April last year. Let's just remind ourselves that what we agreed to do as a pilot, along with a number of other local authorities, was to access a pot of money from the government to implement efficiency savings. And that was brought by the Liberal administration. Yes, we agreed with that. Why wouldn't we take that opportunity to spend that money that was provided to us? A number of recommendations came as a result of that for further efficiency savings. But unless we've all forgotten, in May a major event happened. A tragic event happened, in fact, which is the Conservatives took power of this country, along with the Liberal Democrats in coalition. That made a commitment to decimate local government and public services. So, Mr. Mayor, the political climate is very, very different since then. Now, since the Derby Evening Telegraph ran a very good story to highlight this particular issue a couple of weeks ago, and I brought this along, and Councillor Marshall, the Cabinet member whose portfolio this falls in, I brought a number of his quotes. And I know Councillor Marshall's always up for a laugh, so I thought let's just look at some of these comments to do with such an important matter as spending over £1.2 million of taxpayers' money. And the first one, his justification, is, over time, our staff will learn these skills. So, you know, let's get this right, Mr. Mayor. We are paying, and I've got the wage bill here for council officers today, £624,000. So, as Councillor Allen says, it's not fair that we should drag officers into this. I totally disagree, and I'm going to do exactly that. So, Mr. Mayor, if we just look at our officers and imagine that they're not people anymore, but just bags of money with a label and a pound sign, let's put some figures to those labels. The Director of Neighbourhoods, £116,187 a year. Director of Children, Director of Children and Young People, £118,890. Director of Adults, Health and Housing, £113,000. Director of Resources, £116,000. And, Mr Mayor, our own esteemed Chief Executive, £160,000. GPs and consultants in hospitals sometimes aren't paid that amount of money. And, Mr Mayor, I asked for a contract. I wanted to see our officers' contracts. I wasn't allowed to actually see them. Just to alleviate any suspicions, there was no opt-out clause for the Chief Executive saying that the Council was going to pay him $300,000 for a golden goodbye if he left Derby, so I want to alleviate that fear. There's nothing to suggest that that's in his contract, although I haven't seen it. But, Mr Mayor, there's an interesting point here about the Chief Executive. The Chief Executive will ensure that budgeting, planning and performance management are an excellent standard. Now, let's make it quite clear. When, over the years, as officers' salaries have continued to rise, the media have made an issue out of it, the public have made an issue out of it, and how have we defended that? We've defended it by saying they have expertise. You know, we need to pay the top price, just as you're recruiting, just as if you're saying that they're some football stars that we need to desperately bring into our club. You know, they can do the business, they can score the goals. They've proven it. That's why we need them. That's why they command these big salaries and get paid more than the Prime Minister of Britain. So, Mr Mayor and our own Councillor Jennings, I mean, if we're going to use an analogy, let me use one. Let's use a hospital analogy. I know the Tories like blowing up hospitals. They blew one up in Canada, so that's just why that was in my head. So let's use the hospital analogy. If Councillor Jennings is a Chief Executive of a major city hospital, and these are all surgeons and GPs on big salaries, so what we're saying actually is we don't trust their skills and expertise anymore, so we're not going to have them operate on patients. We're still going to pay them those big salaries, but actually we're going to go out into the private sector and pay somebody else a whacking salary to do their job. I mean, how can you justify that? And Mr Mayor, we're all in it together. How are we all in it together? Absolutely preposterous situation, Mr Mayor. And the next important point I want to make, Mr Mayor, is coming back to this article. There's a reference. The accountancy firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers, refused to go into any detail on the work it was doing or its charges. I'm not bloody surprised. Apologies, Mr Mayor, I didn't mean to swear. I am not surprised. Well, I've got a breakdown of some of those charges, and let me just go into some of them. £57,000 for an interim head of transformation agency and support staff. What the hell is all that about? £29,000 on room hire. £98,000 on mobilisation and designing, for whatever that means. Mr Mayor, I don't know if any of you else live in the real world, but this is financial mismanagement on a catastrophic proportion. And I'm sorry to say this, Mr Mayor, if we don't trust our officers anymore, then what the hell are we paying them a huge amount of money? There are people out there losing their jobs. The average salary in this city is £20,000. There are people in retail losing their jobs. I'd like to again challenge the Conservative members and the Liberal members, their lackeys, to go out on the doorstep and justify some of these salaries. I think it's absolutely extraordinary, Mr Mayor. And Mr Mayor, I finally want to... Furthermore, what I would like to sort of mention is Councillor Marshall's, coming back to Councillor Marshall's, some of his comments. He further wanted to justify it by saying that the accountancy firm offered an independent and groundbreaking method of assessment. I mean, let's see what's so groundbreaking. Let me just highlight the York experience. I've got a copy of the York newspaper here. And this is their example of these so-called highly paid consultants. And I quote, more than £600,000 of York taxpayers' money was spent on council consultants, even though they walked off the job before it was finished. And this is dated 23rd of February this year. So what was the solution? This is how groundbreaking it was. Do you think the finance director there said, oh my God, I haven't got the skills or the expertise. We're in trouble. We've got to get more consultants and waste taxpayers' money. No, Mr Mayor. In fact, the finance director, and I quote, recommendations on future improvements were made in October last year, and the Council's own team will now continue and expand the work of the More for York programme with the aim of saving in excess of £15 million over the 3 years. Mr Mayor, in this city, when politicians become starry-eyed and they give into the glitz of the private sector, as the Conservatives clearly have, and the Liberals, I'm sure, no doubt, it's an obsession, Mr. Mayor. It's an obsession, Mr. Mayor, with the private sector that clearly this administration has. And it's going to be alarming, Mr. Mayor. There's already rumblings out there of talk of outsourcing, of privatising, more cuts, Mr. Mayor, and job losses. And, Mr. Mayor, that is not acceptable. And I also want to point out, Mr. Mayor, one final point, is about the political hypocrisy of it all. I mean, the Conservative manifesto, which I will be drawing attention to on a regular basis, the biggest political suicide note in Derby City Council's history. I mean, it's very glossy, but it means nothing. It is a jackanory. Let me highlight what it says here, Mr. Mayor. There's a lot of areas highlighted, may I add, Mr. Mayor. On page 3, Council, Tax and Finance. And there's a quote, a commitment by the Conservatives, cutting spending of government consultants. Yet, I mean, again, you look all blank-faced. We're not on Planet Zod, you know. This is your manifesto. What, I mean, let's see whose name is on it. Who put the name to it? Oh, it's the esteemed Councillor Hickson, of course. Councillor, it says here, promoted by Philip Hickson on behalf of Mid-Derbyshire and Derbyshire Conservative Association. Tell me, are any of you living in the real world? Yes, I am. Yes, I am, and I've got a bigger mandate than any of you. So just remember that, Mr. Mayor. The Conservatives were kicked to trash in Bolton Ward. Over 55% of the electorate supported me for my re-election campaign, and they made it overwhelmingly clear that rejected the Conservative lies and hypocrisy. So, Mr. Mayor, you can say woof woof, Joe. You can say that.
Sorry, please. Hold on. Sorry.
Hold on, please. Let Councillor Vanberg speak.
There are people out there that are losing their jobs, losing their homes, and the best response we can get from those councillors is jokes, mockery, Mr. Mayor. That is absolutely disgraceful. Do you know what it's like? Do you know what some people are going through these current times, Mr. Mayor? Absolutely disgraceful, mate. Some of you aren't fit to hold the title as councillors, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, they say in politics, and it's an old, ancient saying, that politics corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Mr. Mayor, this administration are simply out of touch with mainstream. I mean, we've used the word mainstream, so I'll steal that word. Out of touch with mainstream Derby, Mr. Mayor. They're not living in the real world. How can you justify spending £40 million of taxpayers' money on a new council building? Millions of pounds on paying private sector consultants. What's this obsession, Councillor Jennings, with private sector consultants? Get these officers working for their big salaries. So, Mr. Mayor, we're absolutely adamant that we're going to fight this administration and the Liberals because you are bad for Derby. Both of you are bad for Derby, and you're going to get your comeuppance at the local elections in May, as you did in May this year. Let's not forget, what's your mandate? Parties full of defectors, and all they care is their own personal allegiances. Mr. Mayor, traitors. How can you look confidently on the doorstep and speak to people? Councillor Nater used to call himself a socialist. He used to want to be a Labour councillor, and yourself, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect. So, Mr. Mayor, one thing about
Councillor Vanberg, you're debating on the issue of the cuts. The issue is not of political side, so you should really withdraw those remarks.
Mr. Mayor, that is about the mandate of this administration to spend taxpayers' money, the public purse. And the point I'm making, Mr. Mayor, they have no mandate, Mr. Mayor. So that's why,
Councillor Vanberg, group allegiance is not part of the cuts or the mandate. So, would you please refrain from making these remarks?
Mr. Mayor, this Labour group has made its position quite clear. We believe we are defenders of public services, and we believe that financial mismanagement under this administration, backed by the Liberals, is totally unacceptable. So, Mr. Mayor, we urge a plea really, to see the sense of what you're about to do and get the officers implementing these efficiency savings. And let's not forget, Derby City Council has for years and years been a top-rated authority, known for delivering high-value, quality public services with the lowest council tax. You know, has that missed you all? So, Mr. Mayor, certainly our group has made its position quite clear, and we urge you to support this motion.
Councillor Bayliss.
Formally second the motion and reserve my right to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Atwell, you indicated to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what Councillor Banway is forgetting is it's his government that has messed us all up. 13 years of rubbish, and that's why we're in the mess, and that's why it's taken 2 political parties in Derby to sort your government's mess out. So how dare you stand there and throw it at us? And if you want to participate in the economy, get yourself a full-time job.
Okay. Hello. Can I have some order, please? Order, please. Council.
I think, and I suggest that the motion before us is of a serious nature. I know passions have run high in part of the debate, but some really pertinent issues have been raised by Councillor Banway, and I think somebody needs to answer those points in a senior manner. Why do we pay? And this is not having a go at our senior officers. I think they're very good officers. They're competent in their own way. But they must be allowed to do their job in the way that they've been appointed to do their job. Can you imagine some consultants coming in here, I don't know whether from Birmingham, maybe from London, spending 3 to 4 weeks, maybe, I don't know, 2 months, maybe even 3 months, and then telling Derby people how to run their services. And we've had chief officers, some of who have been working in this area for 5 years, 4 years, 6 years. They've got the expertise, they've got the fingers on the pulse, they know what Derby people want, they know what Derby's elected members want in terms of what their priorities are. And here we are promising to pay 1.2 million to a firm of consultants who haven't actually even shown us the design or a rough sketch of the design which they might want to implement here. Before we part with the money, and before we part with any money, before we part with even a penny, I would like to see what we are buying. If you, in any other walk of life, would you just on a promise part with that amount of money because some consultant is saying, oh, I'll be able to give you this, but I can't give you the size or the shape of it. Can you know, if somebody is saying to you, I can send you to the moon, and you will ask what sort of equipment they will operate, have they got a right sort of background in this area, are they going to send you in a rocket, or are they trying to send you in a Lada car which runs on a diesel? You would be entitled to ask those questions before you gave them a penny. We here in this chamber haven't seen 2 words strung together in terms of what paying this money for, and yet we're being asked to part with this. The best services are always run by officers who have been in an area and they have got familiarity. Derby has got its own culture. Our workforce has got its own culture, and yet here we're being told some consultants will come in here and they cut our workforce by 600, 500, but we don't know where those cuts are going to come from, and there is no suggestion that those consultants will be able to deliver the same volume of service as is being delivered now for less money. We haven't been given that promise. So if they are able to deliver the same volume of service as now, and there is not going to be a reduction in service, and if they can give us that pledge, and then they say, well, okay, you know, we will be promising to deliver same service in a different way, we will be running them differently, we will be reorganizing them differently, and also told us how they're going to reorganize them differently, then you might consider either buying it or leaving it. But at the moment, all we've been asked to do is give them a blank check in return for possibly something, possibly nothing. And I think that's a bad deal, and we should not go ahead with this. I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The current financial situation we find ourselves in is on the back of over 10 years of unprecedented growth in this country under a Labour government. The last 2 years has been due to the crash of the banks. And the arguments that's been put forward regarding that is that we should leave that regulation alone. And I think that's the wrong thing to do. But it's not the pertinent issue for this particular debate. One of the things we've got to remember across this chamber is that our job is to be a critical friend and point out where you can save money, because there is, in the public domain, the talk of cuts of 40%. In Derby it's 30%. Those cuts, the Labour Party would argue, are too deep. We accept that we have to reduce the public purse, but they're too deep. And why are they too deep? Because the Tories know they can get away with a lot more in this current halo period. And I find it a bit odd when we're criticised here about pointing these things out. And I also will point out, to quote the Bible, as it were, that you said you'd have a tight control of the council finances and spending, and you seem to take much fright when we point out to you where there are areas you can do something about this. In Derby, Councillor Atwell, you remember that a magic number, it's 8. So you won by, it's 8. And across this city, Derby had a good result for Labour. We won Derby North, Derby South. I seem to remember somebody came third in a 2-horse race. And we won 2 seats off the Liberals. We didn't lose a seat in this city. We will take this to the ballot box. We will take this to the ballot box. We take all these points to the ballot box. We realise in this chamber we're going to get no favours. And to some degree we're going to suffer a defeat or two, or several, each time we come here. We accept that. Our job is simple. We've got a magic number, it's to get to 26, and we plan to do that and become an absolute majority again. You couldn't beat us on the ballot box. You can outvote us now, but we'll be back. We'll be coming back, and every time we see something that's wrong, or something you should be doing better, we'll point it out. We make no apologies for that, and we'll continue to do so. The points that Councillor Banwett made is that we have some very highly paid professional officers who ought to be looking to do this as part of their normal day job. We shouldn't be somebody who's affording firms of accountants and consultants. It's often a criticism made actually by Conservative members, quite right. I don't mind reflecting that back to you. You must be rocking and squirming a little bit that we're saying it to, but we will continue to say it. Where we think something's wrong, we'll point it out. Not only will we point it out, we've got to realise that when we took decisions before, there's been changes. There's been changes in the way that this country is run, and there's been changes in the way this council is run. And you had to do a deal to make sure you could run the council in this particular way. You couldn't beat us at the ballot box, and if you actually tot up the number of councillors who were elected on a Labour manifesto, we've still got the largest number, and we will have the largest number in the future. So we make no apologies for saying these things and pointing them out and making you think about them. It's our job to do so. We're the actual opposition here. The Liberals are ineffective. They've signed up to the Conservative manifesto, and they're merely the poodles and lapdogs. And all the stuff that's going to come back in July, 28th of July, we'll be being here and we're pointing it out to you. It's your government making these decisions. Your government making these choices, and your government will be the ones that lose your seats at the next elections. Thank you.
Councillor Jennings. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to address a few of the points that have been raised by the Labour group, because they just don't seem to understand the process at all, or what even's going on in the council, even though they claim to represent their electorate, but they don't appear to actually know what is happening. We have a transformation board where details of the questions that have just been raised by the Labour group, such as what's happening, what's the plan, what's the time scale, all those issues are quite clearly available to the leader of the Labour group, who is invited to that process. And for the last year that I can remember, no Labour leader has actually attended one of those meetings. So I'm afraid if you want to know the information, join in the process. The speed and the pace of change that are required for this council are driven by outside factors. They're driven by a Labour government that spent the money and borrowed the money and made promises to schools that they would be rebuilt on borrowed money. Well, are we rewriting history or living history? You know, I think what we need to understand is that because of the pace that we need to move at, we do need to hire in that outside expertise. This is a company that have done this across many authorities. They've got the relevant experience. They know how to do it. During the process, they have run for this authority 44 workshops on the transformation programme. They've engaged with 400 staff. They've given regular reports and updates to the leadership and that was available to the leader of the Labour group if he could be bothered to turn up and listen to the presentations. And the cost of £1.2 million to actually hire in this company is insignificant compared to the £50 million gross that we are predicting we will save over the next 3 years by paying that money. The other relevant point to make is that there's been a lot of unwarranted discussion about officers and perhaps even slurs on our senior officers' capabilities, which I don't think is warranted in this chamber. However, for your information, 2 of our senior officers have been through this process before. However, the majority have not. But what they are doing, they are working alongside the partners that we have engaged, and they are taking a learning process all the way through that. And as we go through the process further and further, the support from the external partners will decrease as our senior officers pick up the baton and run with it and deliver the final stages of the programme. I think, actually, that spending £1.2 million to save £50 million is common sense. And if you can't see that, then you don't deserve to represent your electorate.
Councillor Banwat, would you like to sum up, please?
I think we've said what we need to say, Mr. Mayor. We'll move to the vote. Thank you.
All those in favour of the amendment, please, motion, please show. All against the motion, please show. Defeated. Motion is defeated. It's not a grazing field, Councillor Banwat. Moving on to the next motion, Councillor Shanker to move, Councillor Jackson to second. Councillor Shanker, please.
Right. Thank you. I hope that we can all agree on this simple motion. That if, or can I say when, agreed, will demonstrate to the residents of Derby that we're all committed to providing a range of good leisure services. I'm sure everyone in the Chamber will agree with me of the pride we all experience with England reaching the World Cup finals, but then share the disappointment of the lack of progress made in South Africa. Equally disappointing was the lack of provision and foresight demonstrated by the relevant authorities within the city, preventing the screening of England's 4 games on our big screen. Again, I think we all appreciate that the Football World Cup and the European Championships are more than just football tournaments. they present us with an unfortunately all too rare opportunity to unite as a nation behind one team, sharing the successes and feeling the pain that comes with this. When the big screen was first planned for Derby, part of the justification was that it would provide a unique opportunity for crowds to gather and watch top sporting events. Well, the events do not come much bigger than England games at the World Cup. The arguments to convince people that it would be an asset to Derby were won on this basis. The decision makers this time round must accept some responsibility in letting down and denying Derby residents a real opportunity to come together in a party atmosphere and cheer our national team. In an extremely short period of time, several thousand signatures were gathered on petitions to have the decision reviewed. This demonstrates the level of public disappointment that these games were not shown here in Derby, despite being shown across cities, despite being shown in many cities in the UK and across the world. Like I said, this is a simple motion, and rather than thinking of what could have been, I feel it's more appropriate for us all to move on and ensure this debacle is not repeated. Therefore, we should be able to agree that the current and any future administrations look seriously into being able to screen future England games, particularly those at the next European Championships. And before someone gets up and says, we need to qualify first, let's have some faith. Derbyshire Police do a great job in policing across the city. I am confident that with the due consideration, planning and control measures in place, they will be able to police such events routinely without great cause for concern. We should not let the threat of a few mindless individuals ruin opportunities for the vast majority. Let's not turn this motion into a political football. I urge all members to support it, and as a minimum we will have a guarantee that the next European Championships will be screened here in Derby on our big screen.
Councillor Jackson.
You need to feel like Councillor Kerr tonight, popping up and down all the time. That's where the similarity ends, I hope. Yes, I have here actually a breakdown of the figures for running the screen. Now, we've been talking about enormous figures tonight, and it's only £10,000. But to me, it is £10,000 that's actually being wasted at the moment. It would have been really wonderful to have shown the football, and I do declare an interest because I'm a huge football fan and a season ticket holder, but it will certainly be quite ironic if in 2012 we don't show the European Cup, but we do show the Olympic Games. I mean, I really can't see the point of that at all. And at the moment, it's there, sort of churning out all sorts of stuff, apart from Carmen and the stuff from Covent Garden, I hasten to add. And people just aren't there, that they're ignoring it. I think that some people find it actually a bit of an intrusion. The whole thing is not aesthetically pleasing, and if we can't use it for things like the football, for the community, for the people of Derby, then I think it really should be removed.
Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm a great football fan. I've been involved in football for over 50 years. I've been up and down the country officiating at games, and I've seen the problems that football brings to all events. And this event will have certainly, in my opinion, done that. I fully declare my right to say that I agree entirely with the ruling Conservative Council that they made the correct decision. And I will prove that to you. I have been making inroads into what other cities who showed on their screen what problems they have. Take Bristol. Thug minority, and I know it is a minority, spoilt it. Over 8,000 people were at the first match. Crush problems ensured, with many families having to leave with their children because of the crush. And then there was the alcohol that came into it as well. Football spectators, again a minority, seem to think that alcohol and football mix. Unfortunately, they don't, and it causes problems. Bristol made the next game an all-ticket encounter with no alcohol. Unfortunately, only 4,000 turned up, and even then they had to have cordons around the enclosure to ensure that it didn't spill over into other parts of the city. Bristol is not a great footballing city, although they have 2 football teams which are not well supported. So I decided then that I'd go to one of the most well-supported football cities in the country, Manchester. Well, Manchester really had some fun. They had problems galore, fighting, glasses being thrown, glasses being used as toilets. Police had to wade into the crowds to break up the brawls, 18 arrests for public order offences and thefts. Again, families left because of the antics of people in the crowd. Trouble carried on after the matches in the streets. So Manchester did very well. Got a few pictures here, if you want to see them, of the problems in Manchester. I then went to Leicester. While they didn't seem to have the problems of Manchester, they still had alcohol-related arrests. This was made despite the screen being shown, or the screen being in an alcohol-free zone. Now, I went to a city where perhaps certain people in Derby don't like. I went to Leeds. Stewards were required to marshal the crowds, and they had to make requests for people to calm down. But some, and minority again, continued to make the event unpleasant. I then went to another city, Swansea. Well, some minor problems in Swansea, but nothing like the other problems that they experienced. Not many people watched the game. I wonder why. Walthamstow, not a footballing place at all. You ought to listen to this because you've been letting a lot of air come out tonight over there. Well, let's have some. Let's hot air. Walthamstow. Margaret, love, you're a lovely lady, but please be quiet while I continue. Walthamstow. Well, Walthamstow were a bit sensible. Mr. Mayor, can I please have some order, please? They don't like these things that's going against this minority of people that sign their pension.
Councillor Rapton, please. I have asked already for order.
Right, Walthamstow. Well, they haven't got a football team as such. They haven't even got a team up to Central Midlands Football League standard. They didn't advertise the matches. Not many turned up as a result. This is beside the Met Police actually advised them not to put it on. And it was a very low-key decision, and they felt that it wasn't a success despite that, probably because of the low-key decision. Now, coming back to our city of Derby. Right? Well, it is, thank goodness for that, because I'll give you some facts. Okay. And I won't go quickly. How long have I got? Not long, all right then. In the last 2 years, listen, in the last 2 years...
please, some order.
Can you stop the clock? Thank you. As a referee, I'll stop me watch.
Time is up, Councillor Harwood. Time is up. Councillor Harwood, time is up.
Well, that's unfair.
It was paused, that's why I said 16 seconds.
Right, in the last 2 years in Derby, there's been 3,455 crimes likely to be alcoholic related to. The city centre is a hotspot for rowdy and nuisance behaviour. The police have been caught to over 2,000 instances in the last 12 months. The police were right not to have it in Derby. I support the police and not this motion.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I completely agree with a lot of the sentiments that's been expressed, particularly by Councillor Shanker and Councillor Jackson. However, I do have somewhat of a problem with the wording, in particular the focus on one particular event and the words guarantee. So perhaps I can also help Councillor Harwood, and I have an amendment.
Got the amendment?
Mr Mayor, the amendment is currently being circulated, so if you give members an opportunity to have a look at that.
Have all the members got the copy of the amendment? Okay. Is the amendment in order, Mr. Stewart?
Yes, Mr Mayor, the amendment is in order.
Do you wish to speak on this amendment? Who is seconding it? Okay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, as you can see, first I believe that this event should embrace, the big screen should be able to show other events. Sorry. Oh, right, okay. In particular, I do disagree with Councillor Jackson. I think the Olympics should be shown as well. However, I do think that we need to recognise the concerns that the police have had about this event. But I am sure, and I agree with the sentiments voiced earlier, that with a bit of discussion and negotiation, most events can be shown at a reasonable cost. So therefore, the wording in this motion says that what we should do is look to wherever we can show important sporting events on the big screen at a reasonable cost. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Skelton. Anybody wishes to speak on the amendment? Councillor Grimondale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to also congratulate Councillor Harwood on his extremely hard work, travelling all over the country, reviewing the football matches. I personally support the amendment to the motion. It's not an easy job to make a decision when England is going to be televised. I'd like to announce the latest result, which I think is 1-0 to Spain. So Germany 0, Spain 1. It's intuition. But I do support the amendment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Sir Harwood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, I support the amendment, although I might point out that most sports, and tennis was on last week because I happened to see it on the big screen, most sports are okay. They're not alcohol related. Football has this stigma which carries it, alcohol, and that's the problem. Yes, I support the amendment, but I would say this, that as far as I'm concerned, football, particularly when it's on terrestrial television, as it was, should not be shown on the big screen.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can just picture the big screen with a match on and there being a riot in Derby, and it's all to do with a refereeing decision. And guess who the referee would be? Hey? And to be fair, the biggest problems we've seen in this World Cup have come from referees. So I'm not going to take everything that my favourite referee has said tonight as gospel, but I'm really worried. I've got real concerns. I just think that the City Council's travel plan has just been blown apart. I've never known anybody who could get to Walthamstow, Liverpool, Leeds, Swansea. He must have a broomstick. Is that what you've been on, Frank, a broomstick? Because I can't see anybody who could get to all of these places. But, well, who knows the modus operandi that Frank would use to whiz round doing his tour of Britain's big screens. But I was actually in Plymouth. No, not at the Argyle, at a co-op conference, a couple of, well, not last weekend, but the weekend before. And their big screen, smack bang in the middle of Plymouth, and believe me, I think Plymouth's got as many bars as Derby. I'd stand to be corrected, but if they're not as many, they're a lot bigger. But the whole of the square was laid out like a tennis court. and there must have been 500 or more seats laid out there. Now, I know Frank says that alcohol fuels football, but my daughter went to see the tennis last Friday, and I think she said it was £6.99 for a Pimm's. I don't suppose you'd get too drunk on them. Even I couldn't afford that sort of thing. But alcohol and sport goes together. Cricket has beer tents. Football has beer. Tennis has beer. And golf, you know, it's all supported by whisky companies. Pardon?
Everybody's asleep.
Is everybody asleep? Barbara said everybody's asleep. Look, if you want me to do a council and start yawping down the microphone and slagging somebody off, I can do that. But the fact is that all of these things have some alcohol related with them and sports, but it's a matter of responsible drinking. And the fact is that our big screen is on an alcohol-free zone, and what we need is to get the police involved in making sure that those regulations are complied with. I was listening to somebody the other day talking about cycling on the marketplace and in the city. And we're not getting the kind of support we need to stop cyclists charging through the pedestrian walkways. And somebody was talking about, and I said, do you ever go on the marketplace? And they said, yes, why? I said, have you seen the notices on the marketplace? This is a skateboard-free and cycling-free zone. The police office is actually there on the marketplace. And do they do anything about the skateboarders and the cyclists who are blatantly breaking the law, the bylaws of this city? Not the law, it's bylaws. Stuart will tell me if I'm wrong there. But the fact is, those laws are completely ignored. And if we're going to have this sport on the big screen, we need to make sure that we have compliance with those regulations. And on that basis, I think that the amendment is a sensible amendment. It's quite right. It's no good us standing here tonight saying we don't want to spend all this money on the council house, we don't want to spend all the money on consultants, and yet not support a motion that asks for a reasonable expenditure for the football. So I think that on the basis of that, it's a sensible amendment, and I think this group can support it. Thank you.
Hussain?
Yeah, I have to say I was very disappointed when I learned that the council is not going to show the footballing event on the big screen. It took me by surprise because when we were having discussion in terms of what this big screen will do, time and again we were told that all national events which will attract public interest will be shown wherever possible. And there is no bigger event than World Cup football. And I think we should have made more effort to ensure that Derby people were able to see it on the big screen in an aggregated kind of collective fashion. And to deprive them of this pleasure, I mean, those of you who are used to going to the matches, you can see enhances the pleasure of watching a match when you're doing it with your friends and when you're doing it in a crowd. Councillor Harwood did surprise me by supporting this amendment because I think he was obsessed with looking at the internet to see if he could pick any significant incidents which he could have cited in the council chamber and saying, look, somebody was stabbed up there, somebody got killed in there. It didn't. In the end, he only had to make repeated references to people consuming alcohol and one or two people doing. But you tell me, any event where people gather and alcohol is not consumed, where one or two people are ticked off, you can talk about any particular event. So therefore, I think the amendment is sensible, but we should make more effort to ensure that in future we do everything we can to let people of Derby see the national events.
Okay, I've got on the list Councillor Bayliss, Councillor Shankar, Councillor Naita and Councillor Rao. Do you still want to speak? Councillor Bayliss then. Councillor Shankar.
Mr. Mayor, would Councillor Naita like to go first? Thank you. As Councillor Roberts has put it, our group are happy to support the amended motion. I thank Councillor Carr for putting that in. I think I just must mention our thanks to Councillor Harwood for flitting around from city to city, just as he does from political party to political party. So we like the amendment and we'll support it.
Councillor Naita, you wish to speak?
Chair, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to, if you want to move it.
Can we move to the vote? All those in favour of the amendment. Do you want to wind it up, though, Councillor Carr? No. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. That's carried, and again, it's unanimous. Twice. Moving to the motion, substantive motion, the mover, do you want to wind that up, Councillor Carr?
Shankar.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Shankar, you moved it, didn't you? Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Banway.
Councillor Banway. Yeah.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I've got a copy of the Cabinet report which approved the big screen, and I think it's just worth just highlighting some of the key points of the recommendations. And this is dated 1st of August 2006. And one of them, the recommendations, a big city screen can act as a stimulus to increase visitor numbers and satisfaction levels. It would also assist in regenerating the marketplace and the historic heart of the city. And the next recommendation, Mr. Mayor, intensive use of the marketplace to view major sporting and cultural events could have an important impact on community cohesion and help establish the marketplace as a cultural venue. Now, this was a report that went to full council. All parties supported it and approved it. So, Mr. Mayor, this is something that the city, we had a mandate for, we supported it, and we've got to give it a go. I mean, clearly, Councillor Harwood, the glass is half empty with Councillor Harwood. We've got to give it the opportunity, and simply to say, I think it's absolutely extraordinary contribution to simply say that Derby City football fans are hooligans and lager louts. I mean, what an incredible thing to say. What a confused thing to say, and I think an absolutely disgraceful point to make, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Mayor...
Hold on, please.
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor, we certainly welcome this motion. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favour of the substantive motion now, please show. Yeah, as amended, of course. Any against? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. That concludes tonight's meeting.